WPIAL Blitz Show podcast, Cumberland Valley edition. My name is Bruce Badgley. Alongside, hey, there's my buddy Ian McMeans. Hey, Ian.
Hello. It's hard to believe this season flew by and we're here already at the state championship game. It seems like just yesterday it was August and we were talking about the season previews. This year went faster than any I can remember, but it's kind of weird coming off Thanksgiving and having state championships already too that, usually we're a week later in December, but here we are and let's go.
Yeah, and we got a very special guest with us tonight, Brett Myers, head coach of Twin Valley. Brett making his first appearance with Twin Valley, but state championships, are not foreign territory to you, Brett, right?
No, I've been here a couple times before, and every time it's been a little different, but they're all been special. So looking forward to this one.
Good, good. Go ahead, Ian.
So, Coach, coming off a win against Aliquippa in the state semifinals, can you kind of just take us through that game a little bit and kind of, the emotions and roller coaster of your team where you really dominated, possession and field position in the first half, and then in the second half kind of had to hang on for dear life at the end, and just for Twin Valley making it to their first state title game. Obviously, you've been there before with other schools, but just kind of go through how the game went for you guys.
Yeah, I think roller coaster is a great explanation of the game. I mean, everybody's talking about tale of two halves, and definitely two different things. First half was, exciting, a lot of big plays and, guys coming up with stuff. And then the second half seemed like it went on forever. But in the end, we pride ourselves on being a defensive program. And, if the game's on the line, I'd love to have those 11 guys out there and have Coach Ryan calling the defense and, seeing what'll happen. And we happen to get come out on the right end of that one.
Wow, fantastic. And this that's been kind of a crescendo here with Twin Valley football since you took over. I remember sitting in the shed at the golf outing this last summer. I mean, we're freezing our butt off, but back then I just got a sense from you that you were really confident coming into this season, that you really had a stellar team. And so talk a little bit about, the expectations you've had for this team and then how they've been able to fulfill those expectations.
Yeah, I mean, the past, 3 years, we played at a pretty high level. 3 years ago, I think we went 10-2, and then last year 9-3, and our three losses came to Wyomissing, and then two of them to Lampeter Stroudsburg, who was in the state finals, and kind of felt like those years of winning, but our losses being against big time programs kind of were building us towards this moment, and the number of returning starters and what was going on in the weight room, all showed signs of that we could make a deep run. And let's be honest, in District 3, if you can get to the district finals, that means you're pretty good. And from there, it just depends on how that ball bounces. And so far, the ball's been bouncing our way.
Yeah, so just something that I've always been curious about, and since we're to this point in the year where you're in the state playoffs and you've been here before, but kind of as the season goes on and you think like, hey, I've got a pretty good team, we're winning games. How much sort of scouting outside of your district do you start to do as the season goes on and you get closer and closer to having to play other teams that are outside of who you're used to playing all the time?
Yeah, I don't think there's much real scouting going on too far down the road, but you do pay attention a little bit. You catch scores of certain teams, and obviously in 4A where it is right now, if you're a football guy in the state of Pennsylvania, you know that you better pay attention to Aliquippa, because they're going to end up in there. So you usually have an eye out for those guys. But like I said, District 3 is it's pretty tough, and it's so local that you kind of know who's going to be where, and you just if you get a chance to get to that finals and you think, wow, if we can make it out of it, the obvious next step is the WPIAL, and you expect Aliquippa to be the team out of the WPIAL.
We've always said on this show to never pick against Aliquippa, even if they're the number 7 seed with 3 losses coming into the playoffs. You just don't pick against them in the postseason or ever, really.
Yeah, that's a good plan.
Go ahead there, Ian.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things we talk about on the show too, we say it's a family show, but obviously for you having, your son playing on the team, can you talk a little bit about kind of the journey and what it means to you to have, your son kind of along for the ride here as you take this team to the state championship game?
Yeah, I mean, both my boys, I got to coach both of them here the last couple of years, and Evan's off at Kutztown right now, and those guys. Somebody asked me about it earlier in the week, and those guys have been to three state finals with me as ball boys, and they kind of come to expect our teams to play well, and it's we're kind of living up to that. And when it comes down to being around Lucas, it's just it's just great to be around him. And it's a lot of these guys that are on the team have been his friends forever. So I've known most of them since Little League, whether it was basketball or football or lacrosse or even baseball. The guys have been around. So it's been a really special year that way. And being able to spend extra time with your kid is always a good thing. And obviously you understand about time and children and how nice it is to be around them. Some of it's more than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, one of the things that Ian likes to talk about with our coaches is, obviously there's the big name guys that are, touching the ball and what have you. Who are some of those linemen that you want to throw a shout out to that have just done a tremendous job all season there on the offensive and defensive line?
Well, you work, working left to right. Liam Sheehan, he's our only junior on the offensive line. He's 6'4", 260, and got a very, very bright future. He's got great feet, and what a student of the game. He's just constantly improving. And then, our anchor and Grayson Miller, who's probably the best lineman right now in the Lancaster Lebanon, if not District 3. He's a 4-year starter for us, who's, one of our captains and a big time leader there. And then Noah DiGiacomo is the strongest player on the team. He's a 2-year starter. And then at right guard, you got Andrew Boswell, who's in his first year as a starter and, has played at an unbelievable level. And then Big Zach Trout is our right tackle. He's going into his second year. And those guys have done an amazing job on the offensive line and getting things done. And then defensively, a lot of those guys are playing. And then you got Andrew Cabegas and Joey Buckley and Aaron Sumner at the end, who are kind of setting our edges and getting some pass rush for us. So there's some guys there that have really, really exceeded expectations. And the reason that's happened is because their work ethic's so good and they love the game and they love to learn. So it's been a really special group to be around. And we've been lucky enough now to be around them for 18 weeks. And, that's pretty special.
Good, Ian.
Nice. So one other thing, Bruce kind of stole my thunder with the question about the line, but one other thing we ask about is just kind of how the community's rallying behind the team, right? First trip to the state championship game for Twin Valley, first district title for Twin Valley, I believe, if I read that correctly too.
Yes.
So how's kind of the community atmosphere been around the team? Because this has been certainly a historic run of success for you guys.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, last Friday night, I mean, the bleachers were full, and that's a 2-hour ride, and they still managed to fill the place up. And it's a special place with the special families, and I would expect Thursday night for the place to be pretty packed, and people will be bundled up. If it's not on the top, there'll be layers of green and
Well,
white underneath.
I'm bundled up. I'm out on the deck here, so
Bruce voluntarily does the show from his deck. That's his choice.
But yeah, it's been really great, and we got a great community, special community, and from in our district, it's top down. I mean, superintendent, school board members, they'll all be there cheering everybody on, and and it works the whole way through the school and then through the community, and it's been a really, really good fall for us at Twin Valley.
That's great.
yeah, and that's the thing too. Obviously, everybody pretty much knows that I'm a Berks County guy. Technically, you guys are Berks County. I mean, all the way down there, in the south there. But it's been fun to watch. The growth of Twin Valley football. Over the last couple of years here, Brett. And talk to me about when you finally felt like you were over the hump. I mean, Twin Valley had a really, despite being a 5A school, or excuse me, a 4A school, had really difficult time in getting numbers, in really developing, a program out there. So when did you know, even your own self, that it finally clicked, and you've got this train on the track, and there really isn't anything stopping it?
But that's probably a tough question. But our little leagues have been really, really good numbers over the past 10 years, and I didn't have much to do with it when my kids were playing. I just sit in the end zone and watch it. But you could see the passion and the energy, and then as time goes on, and you start getting a little more involved, and you start hearing people whispering and talking about it, and you realize that Twin Valley is really a sleeping giant when it comes to all sports, not just football. I mean, look at our lacrosse program, and look at our track and cross country programs, and then our girls sports have been unbelievable. And you start realizing it, and you just got to tap into it a little bit. I mean, there's plenty of athletes in the hallway, and it's just being able to get them out has been a huge help.
Wow. Go ahead, Ian.
Um, so that's all I had because Bruce stole my question on the offensive line, but that's okay. It's all good.
Well,
So
I did say that's what you like to ask.
I do. You're right. You're right. But yeah, Coach, thanks so much for joining us. And you are technically the West representative here in this championship game. So even though you knocked off a WPIAL team, we'll be rallying and pulling for the West to bring home another championship. So best of luck to you this week and moving forward with your program.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, Brett, I'll see you on the field there Thursday night, man. I look forward to it. Okay.
Yep.
All right,
Wait.
just go ahead and exit out, and we'll take the show from here. Take care.
All right. Thanks, sir.
See ya.
Yep.
Bye. I'll tell you what, it's when you get around programs and you're relatively close to them. I mean, I kind of alluded to the fact that there was a reason why I don't play in a ton of golf outings. Okay. And I chose the Twin Valley golf outing this summer because I just like what Brett Myers is doing down there and what he has done, in basically bringing Twin Valley football up from Bolivian, as Mike Tyson might say.
Yeah, no, that was great to kind of hear his perspective because obviously he had taken Middletown to a couple state championship games and has some really good insights into not only what it takes to get here but kind of how you prepare your team and all that, and just to kind of hear about how the program has built up from low numbers. And that's one of the hardest things for a program to overcome is when you're in one of those higher classifications, if you can't get numbers out, and this is something we've talked about all year with in the WPIAL, the Baldwins, the Fox Chapels of the world that have large enrollment numbers and just can't get kids out for football. And then you start to get kids, your good players start going to the Central Catholics of the world, right? I'm using WPIAL examples, but same kind of thing out there, right? That they start going to these other schools that have more program tradition. It's hard to keep those kids local, for your football team. But I really loved hearing about how they started seeing it building up from the youth level, because we talk on the show all the time about how important that integration with like middle school and the youth level is to the high school level. And I remember when Coach Casper from now Mars, formerly Pine Richland, talked about how they ran the same playbook in middle school that they ran in high school so that those kids knew what they were doing and were ready to throw the ball down the field when they got to high school and weren't like shell shocked by a high school offense when they got there. So I think for a long-term success, that's a really great way to build up your program overall.
It's for me, it's a little bit tough too, Ian, because my grandson played against Twin Valley, and as an 11-year-old, and hearing Brett talk about that and the great facilities they've got, and announcing all the players' names and making a really big deal out of the football and what have you. I can understand why. The train is on the track there. So, all right. Hey, listen, we've got a few friends that are waiting to come in here. So we'll go ahead. Looks like we got Pat McDermott and looks like Dave Micah. So we're getting the party started here. Oh, look at here, Dave Micah. He's got the Christmas tree in the background there from Eastern PA football. And why don't you introduce Pat there, Ian?
Yes, my good buddy Patrick McDermott. Both probably know him as PA Football History on the social media sites. He does an awesome job, provides us with some tidbits throughout the year of historical stuff. Also, on his website has like a whole history of, passing, rushing, receiving leaders from state championship games, as well as all-time wins lists and everything else. Patrick does an awesome job of just listing out all the history of the state statewide. So Patrick actually did something unique last weekend, which is one of the reasons I wanted to bring him on the show. So Patrick, why don't you talk about how your weekend went after Thanksgiving?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. First of all, I do want to throw a plug. You mentioned the state championship game record book that we have on the site. A healthy portion of that was my friend Shane Schaefer, who does awesome work through Minersville's football program. So I definitely want to give credit.
Yeah, right. We've had Shane on the show, haven't we?
Yeah, Shane's
we have.
he does awesome work, so he helps me out with that a lot. But yeah, after Thanksgiving, actually the weekend before on Sunday, whenever they released the dates and sites for all the semis, I took a look at it and noticed that 3 of the games were within an hour of me. I'm up in Center County, and so I saw Brett Myers on Friday night. Never met him in person. You guys just had him. But I saw him in person in Midland County on Friday night against Aliquippa. And then I hit the doubleheader at Mansion Park on Saturday. I saw Peters Township, Bishop McDevitt at 1 o'clock. And then the evening game was Central Catholic against Harrisburg. So I took both my kids Friday night and to Mifflin County, which was brutal. It was stiff wind. It was real field was in the teens, but they were troopers and they loved it. Mifflin County has a beautiful new facility that I encourage people to check out if they're ever in the area. It's an awesome new stadium there. Saturday afternoon, weather conditions improved a bit. That was just my son and I, so I wasn't alone either time. My son stuck out all 3 of the games as well. The afternoon was okay because of the sun. Got cold at night, but that's what it's all about. The best games are played in November, December. You're in Pennsylvania, you're playing games that matter. It's going to be cold. And so it was a blast. We had a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's so cool to be able to do that with your son too, to be able to take in 3 games over a weekend. And I remember as a kid going to high school games with my dad, and that was kind of what started the passion in me for loving high school football. So it's great to carry it on to the next generation. I don't know if my kids quite have it yet. I drag them to a lot of games, but they're still like more interested in what they can buy in the concession stand than the games. But I'm getting there slowly.
We contributed mightily to the local economies of Lewistown and Altoona over the weekend. I can promise you that.
Nice. So since you took in the 3 games that you had, any big takeaways, from the games that you saw?
I think that there was a common theme, and this is going to sound really fully cliches, and I don't want it to, but there's really no other outcome I can come to. And you and I were messaging a little bit over the weekend. Really big theme about the field position throughout all 3 of the games were really big. And when you think about field position, what are the 2 variables that get you there? Special teams and penalties. And I saw an article, I'm sorry, I can't remember the writer, it was in the Post-Gazette today, about how many flags there were, especially in Saturday's games at Altoona. I know the McDevitt-Peters game had over 200 combined penalty yards. And then the Aliquippa game Friday night, Aliquippa Twin Valley, and then the Central Catholic Harrisburg games, there were a ton of penalties in those games as well. I'm not here to say why. I'm not here to criticize any of the officiating or anything like that. I wouldn't do that anyway. I didn't see any major issues with that. I know there's a little bit of a kerfuffle with the onside kick in the Aliquippa game, but most of it, a lot of the penalties, at least off the top of my head, were procedural. False starts, they were legal shifts, legal motions.
Hey, Pat, could you just speak up just a tad?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So a lot of the penalties I think that we saw were those procedural type things where false start, illegal shifts, illegal motions, formation stuff. And it's really cold out. And yeah, these kids have all been playing 14, 15 weeks, but it's the biggest game of their lives for the vast majority of them. Were they nerve-based penalties or not? Who's to say? But so you have the penalty component of the field position that impacted all the games, I think, significantly. But then there was also special teams, and I felt like every team that lost had at least one special teams blunder, and usually multiple. So even Peters Township played really good special teams. They drove down, almost 90 plus yards to kick that field goal to tie it with 2 minutes to go, and ended up losing at the end on McDevitt's field goal. But even at the start of their game, they had a punt blocked on their first possession. Kind of a big swing of momentum. I know that, they kind of survived that, but there were still some errors here and there. And that's what happens with teenagers playing football in big games. But, Aliquippa's special teams were spotty at times. And then Harrisburg had a couple issues as well. Not to say anybody was perfect and not to slam anybody, but it was just kind of a common theme I thought that I saw, across all three games.
Yeah, and Aliquippa had a punt go negative 15 yards or something like that because of the wind.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the wind was no joke, and that's why I this isn't really the topic, but the council kid at quarterback. That's, I think, what impressed me the most was in the fourth quarter they were going into a gale, like a stiff wind, and he was still threading the needle and had, I think he was pushing 200 yards passing just in the second half, and in those conditions. And I know they didn't end up, coming up with the win, but all the quarterbacks all weekend, you don't get this far without good quarterbacks. We all know that. So yeah, and then Aliquippa scored 24 points just on 4 touchdowns. They didn't make a successful conversion. And then I think the bigger thing with Aliquippa's special teams that I saw, not to make this a whole podcast on special teams, because I don't know how many people would really want to listen to that, but Aliquippa scored after the first score. They kick off, and Drew Angle then for Twin Valley takes that kickoff 80 yards back to inside the 15, I think, and then Twin Valley scores real quick. Twin Valley, I was just watching you guys with Coach Myers on. What a well-coached team that is, but they did what you're supposed to do at this time of year. They had a lot of short fields, and they capitalized on it. In that first half, they had a lot of good field position situations, and they punched it in every time. They weren't relying on field goals. They weren't going, 4 and out type situations on them, 3 and out, losing possession. They were scoring on them. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that Twin Valley didn't have a boatload of offensive yards, but they scored 28 points because they capitalized on those opportunities.
Yeah, and capitalizing on opportunities are really important, obviously, in the postseason. But you touched on the fact that quarterback play, of these teams that won. There really wasn't any team that I know of that didn't have an experienced quarterback that didn't move forward, which I've always felt is the big X factor in high school football going into a season. If you've got a returning starting quarterback, you're really a leg up, not only to get started in the season, but finishing in a season. And there's some teams, going into Cumberland Valley, and I'll just kind of throw this out to really everybody, that we've got repeat quarterbacks that have started in state championship games. Pat, how valuable do you think that is in trying to tackle a state championship?
Well, I think it's huge. Obviously you have, especially those returning guys. They're at a minimum starting around their 30th high school game. If you play about 15 last year, about 15 this year. So that's really 3 full seasons of varsity football in 2 years. And so that kind of experience, knowing what to expect. Let's face it, you're still suiting up on a Thursday, a Friday, or a Saturday at Cumberland Valley for a state title. So there's always going to be some element there of nerves and everything else. But if it's not your first rodeo, I think that goes a long way. And, even the guys who are first year starters this year, I'm blanking on his name. I apologize. McDevitt's new quarterback this year. He's following up.
Sebastian Williams.
Right. He's following up the statistically the greatest quarterback in Pennsylvania history in Stone Saunders. And now he's coming through this year. He looked really sharp.
I think he's the most improved quarterback in the state of Pennsylvania this year. Quite honestly, he has really shown in the postseason, I think.
Yeah, he looked great on Saturday. There were actually points where, I thought that McDevitt, they have a great running back as well, so I'm not knocking anybody, but there were points where I thought they really were committing to the run to a point where they didn't necessarily have to as much as they were. I mean, trust the kid to throw it, and they know what they're doing. Jeff Wechter knows way more than I do. But he looked calm, he looked steady. They were doing a great job setting stuff up. It was hitches, slants, and then all of a sudden they'd have a shot at a seam and they would hit it for a big play. And that Peters Township defense was very well coached. I know they have some, Division I recruits on that defense too, so it was no slouch. But so the point being that even a first year starter when you're in December, I mean, that kid's had a lot of football under his belt regardless. So experience matters a lot at every position, but it's football. Quarterback's always going to be king for that.
Yeah.
So
Ian, any another question for Pat?
Yeah, so you've talked quite a bit about the Twin Valley and then the Bishop McDevitt Peters Township game. The Central Catholic Harrisburg game being a rematch of those two schools and kind of the familiarity from one year to the next, even though, some different players on the field, but still, rematching for a second straight year in the semifinals. What did you see from that game being your third game of the weekend, freezing cold at night at Mansion Park, but how'd that one turn out?
Yeah, it was a great game. It was 32-14. I know that. Harrisburg, I thought everybody knows how talented Harrisburg is. Harrisburg has at least 3 Division I guys. They have Kevin Brown, who's one of the best linemen in America. They have, Messiah Mickens, who is a stud. I don't know if anybody saw the one-handed catch he made, but when you're a 220-some pound running back in high school and you can go up and snag it with one hand, you're pretty special, which we already knew about him. And then they also have Elias Koch out on the outside. And so there's a lot of talent on their side. Central Catholic, they were as advertised, big, physical, incredibly fundamentally sound, I thought, even though they did have penalties. But all 6 teams I saw had a lot of penalties. So, and I wouldn't say Central Catholic without seeing the statistics. I wouldn't use the phrase that they had a lot of them. As to be expected for high school this time of year, I would think. But big and physical, did all the little things really well. That offensive line, I think, is as advertised. They are enormous, but they're more than just big. They're good. Chris Black was maybe the most impressive player I think I saw all weekend. And the reason being because there were a lot of times when Central Catholic's line is very good, and we know that. We know there's a lot of future Division I players up front for them. But there were a lot of times when Harrisburg was really making them earn it. And Harrisburg, again, they have Kevin Brown. They have a lot of other good defensive linemen. It wasn't like Central Catholic was just blowing them 5 yards off the ball every play. Chris Black, I saw he had 37 carries. He had 0 negative yard runs. And a lot of that is the line. But there were also a couple times when he turned maybe a 1 yard gain into a 6 yard gain.
Yeah, broke a lot of tackles.
Broke a ton of them. And it wasn't that Harrisburg was doing a poor job with pursuit angles. They weren't, wrapping up well or anything like that. Chris Black is just his motor combined with his vision and his balance. 3 things. When you think about a running back, you think, oh, is he fast? And Chris Black's definitely fast. But to have that kind of balance, his legs constantly churn. And if there was ever 10 inches of space somewhere, he seemed to find it and he seemed to hit it at full speed. And, he really impressed me. I think with Central Catholic moving forward, obviously they've played LaSalle. They've played them this year, week 1. I think that is, and I say this, and I don't want it to come across in a negative connotation or anything. Central Catholic's win against Harrisburg was very impressive. And I would say it was also workmanlike. Not that it was boring or not that it was, a struggle or anything, although Harrisburg did, push them. It was just very methodical. And methodical, positive plays win a lot of football games for you. But we know that they've lost to LaSalle this year. It was a long time ago, but it was still this year. And I would say that the general sentiment across the state is probably that LaSalle is the favorite this week on Saturday night. So I think with Central Catholic, the question I would kind of have is, where's the explosive play going to come from? We know Chris Black is a heck of a runner. We know that he can put his head down and he's going to get you those 4, 8, 10 yard gains at a time. I just wonder if whenever things come down to it and Central Catholic gets behind in the sticks due to a penalty or something else happening, or it's later in the game and they need to make up a score. So I just wonder, we know that they have all the talent in the world to have a guy step up. I just wonder where that's going to come from.
Yeah, hey, listen, I want to just jump in here real quick. Got a question on the live chat, and we'll throw it in the group. Actually, we'll get Dave Micah to talk here a little bit too. It's more of a hypothetical on the season here and what have you. But from our buddy Bruce M. Swiler, he said he's been going to football games since 1958, and he said he's noticed that the officials have thrown the flags this year more than he can ever remember. Dave, let's start with you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the amount of penalties that have been called this year?
The games I've been to in the playoffs, yeah, you see a lot of flags. You always see, I think, more flags in the playoffs. I think they try to be a little more stricter during the playoffs. But I've seen some pretty bad calls. I was just at the Southern Lehigh game, and they cost one team a chance to play for a state championship. It's the human element of it, because without these guys, we don't have sports. So,
yeah, Pat, your thoughts?
I'd echo a lot of the same things Dave said. I mean, I want to say, like, I definitely admire and respect the jobs that referees do, because again, they're an essential part to any Friday night. And I would agree with the thought that, in the playoffs, we're going to see a little bit more. We're going to see more of those tight calls. And I think sometimes it may come down to a referee would rather throw the flag than eat it. Sometimes it feels like the safer thing to call it than to let a busted play go, and really swing the game here and there. Overall, I wouldn't say that the games I've seen this year, I've seen a lot more than just the 3 games
Sure.
this weekend. And it's really crew dependent as well, as we all know. But I would say in general, maybe a little bit, but I don't think that's a thought I would have had independently before hearing that comment.
See, and the only thing for me relative to the officials that I've seen this year is I've seen more discussion, okay, between the officials and an officiating crew. Now, I don't know whether that's the result of the fact that they have a lot more inexperienced guys out there that, they're trying to get the call right and what have you. But I've seen a lot more where getting the calls and getting them right has taken longer in these games is my overriding thing. I don't to me, it doesn't seem like we've had any more or less penalties, but it's taking longer to adjudicate what has happened. Ian, what are your thoughts?
I think officials now are under a lot more scrutiny because of social media, that it's very easy for fans to go on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and just post
or see
rants.
A video of what happened.
Right. Post rants about officiating and things like that. And, in any given game, like Patrick said, these are high school kids, right? Like at the end of the day, these are high school kids. They're going to make mistakes, right? They're 14 through 18-year-olds. And, you're going to have penalties. I haven't noticed more. I think what I've noticed more of this year is people posting pictures of runners that weren't down by contact when they clearly fumbled the ball and things like that. Just off the top of my head, over the last few weeks, there was a call in the Moon Peters Township WPIAL semifinal game that was almost identical to the Southern Lehigh one that happened last week, where people you could have just Photoshop different uniforms on those players, and it was basically the exact same thing, where a cameraman just happened to be in the right spot at the right time and take a picture of the kid fumbling the ball when he's still up off the ground, and then the ball's on the ground, and both times it was ruled down by contact. But that's a hard call to make for an official in real time who's trying to run down the field with the play And it's these kids are so fast these days. I think that's the other thing, that the speed of the game has gotten so much faster over the last 20, 30 years because of all the off-season training these kids do. I mean, you see some of the numbers these kids put up at camps and stuff in the off-season and what they run in on their 40 times and things like that. And it's just, they're so much faster now than it was 20, 30 years ago. Plus, playing on turf versus playing on grass just speeds things up too. So it's hard to officiate these things. And there was some discussion about the Aliquippa Twin Valley game with the fair catch on the pooch kickoff too, that, yes, it was a legal fair catch, but did the ball hit the ground first? And things like that are kind of bang bang plays that I think it's gotten a lot harder to officiate, and there's a lot more public scrutiny. Whereas 30 years ago, before social media, if there were a couple bad calls,
nobody knew about it.
Right, exactly.
It's rarely going to make the paper. True. And have it splattered all over where thousands of people can see it.
Yeah.
Well, and the other part.
Yeah, good.
Sorry. The other part is that on our part as viewers or fans or spectators, whatever, we spend all Saturday and Sunday having Mike Pereira and Dean Blandino break down frame by frame, like the Zapruder film, on why a knee was down or not down or this or that. And then we get to see kind of like a grainy shot on Twitter or whatever of a play. And then we have to analyze it with the exact same specificity and everything. And I think that, there are times where we need to take a step back, and everyone knows about the epidemic right now in officiating nationwide.
Yes.
I understand, when my team's affected by that, it's really frustrating. I get it. But we also need to make sure games can still happen, and making sure that we have a little bit of logic and a little bit of grace for people who are making those bang bang plays. I feel like I've watched, in a previous life, I was a coach as well. And I feel like whenever I watch games, at least once a game, I see a replay and I'm shocked, and in a positive way, impressed by an official who made a call. Like, how many times do you see a catch where there's like a toe tap on the sideline in a college or an NFL game, and you're like, how did that official see that in real time and make that call correctly? So I think that's important too. We usually just focus on the negatives a lot more than the positives.
Correct.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
Dave, you have some final thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like you guys said, whether it's more flags or not, I was at, and I won't say what game it was, where a ref literally threw 9 flags, and threw 5 consecutive flags, which it was a little excessive, but again, listen, like you said, the Southern Lehigh fumble, it's real time they're seeing it. Okay. We get to slow down our video. We get to, look at the pictures on the sideline. Okay. These guys are making split-second decisions. Okay. It's the human element. It happens. But unfortunately, like I said, we may be talking about Cardinal O'Hara instead of Southern Lehigh playing for a state championship. So
Sure.
for those kids, it was a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
All right.
I think just one other last thought to build off of something Patrick said about, we watch these officials, college, the pros, those guys are professionals who get paid to do this, right? These are, they get a small stipend, but they're essentially volunteers, right? At the high school level. And at the high school level, most of these guys are not like officiating games every day of the week, right? Like Gene Steratore talks about, like, oh yeah, I used to go do Big East basketball games, like just to stay sharp and keep my eyes used to seeing things fast in motion so that I'd be ready for the NFL year round, right? Like guys who are officials at the college and professional level, they can pick up games almost, 4 or 5 days a week, especially if you're a basketball official. Whereas high school football officials, like maybe they're doing basketball on the side, maybe they're doing a couple other things, but like for the most part, they're pretty much volunteers that are doing this for not very much money.
I've seen athletic directors, I've seen head coaches, help out on junior high and youth football. I mean, so, you're dead on. I mean, these are volunteers.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I was at one of my kids, he's in 7th grade middle school basketball game tonight, and I was doing the scorebook, and the coach from the other team was yelling at us because the official was keeping the possession arrow in his pocket too, which is good because in the middle school level, there's a lot of possession arrow changes. And I had it in the book, and the guy who was doing the board, like, forgot to flip it to the other team. So he was like, well, the arrow says this, and you're giving them two possessions in a row. And I'm like, no, but I've got
Oh
this way in the
boy.
book. And the official just took the coach side. He's like, look, these guys are volunteers who are like voluntarily doing this.
Yeah.
Like they
It's
volunteered to do
middle
the
school.
book. Like, it's middle
Middle
school
school,
This
right?
guy's
basketball.
job
Like,
isn't like riding on that, like even a high school
exactly.
coach, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, but it was,
And
you
you
know,
know, I've seen some parents complain, and what I tell them is instead of complain, try to fix the problem, try to be official. It's
mhm.
not that easy, you
Yeah,
know. So once you say that, you hear nothing.
Yeah.
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 Hey,
And
Ian,
last thought
wha-
on
wha-
officiating. Sorry. This is just my own personal feeling. I've always felt like, especially at the higher levels like NFL and college levels, they should try and recruit former players into officiating. Because, like, especially like at the NFL level, if you've played defensive back in the NFL, you know what pass interference is. If you've played offensive line in the NFL, you know what holding is. You know when you got
Sure.
away with something, you know, like, when you did it legally and when you didn't. That I'm actually
yeah,
surprised that more former players aren't recruited to be officials, because those guys know what is and isn't a penalty in those situations, and they know when they get away with something, like, I definitely committed pass interference here, but they didn't call it, so I'm okay. But I've always just felt like former players would make great officials because they've done it and kind of know the technique of the game.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's a great idea. Hey, Ian, why don't we let the guys hang with us? Why don't we start, the your presentation related to the
Sure.
Yeah.
shows? I mean, I know Dave's gonna hang with us, Pat. I mean, we're gonna be talking football. Hang with us if you want.
I can do that.
Cool. So
What,
Awesome.
hang with us or talk football or both?
It remains to be seen on the first. I can talk football.
There you
All
go.
right, here we go.
all right. So welcome to Cumberland Valley. This is our WPIAL Blitz Fresh Set of Downs state championship edition of the show. So we'll get rolling. I have this set up to start with 1A, go all the way up to 6A. That way, if anyone else, like maybe Bob Long, decides to drop by later on and wants to talk about the bigger classifications, we're all for that too. And if folks have questions in the chat, feel free to drop them as we go through. So I figure we start with discussing semifinal games, and then we'll talk about the championship matchups. So in Single A, two very decisive games between Clareton and Bishop Guilfoyle, both rolling and shutting out their way to the state championship game. So not a whole lot to say there. Great seasons for Greenville and Belmont Charter, who really hadn't been that deep in the playoffs for Belmont ever, or for Greenville, I think since '96, somewhere around there. But congratulations to those teams. But Clareton and Bishop Guilfoyle, at least for Guilfoyle being the defending champs, was kind of a train on a track here, and it was just a decision about who they were going to play. We kind of thought that it was going to be Clareton Fort Cherry for the WPIAL title, and then that team would have the advantage going into the semifinals, and it wound up being Clareton. So let's talk about this head-to-head matchup. Guilfoyle being the defending champions. This is the third time these teams will meet in a state championship game. Guilfoyle did win the previous two. But as I was going through putting this slide together, the one thing that stood out to me, because, copy paste things from last year, that Guilfoyle's got a whole new slew of players at their offensive skill positions than who they had last year. So it's a different look for the Guilfoyle team, who I saw some comments on Facebook. They refer to themselves as the Evil Empire. So I'm not out of pocket by calling them the Evil Empire. But for Clareton, back in the state championship game for the first time since 2016, which is kind of hard to believe for how much they dominated in the late 2000s, early 2010s, sort of decade there. But first time in 10 years, they're back at this level. And third time these two programs have met, so it's going to be an interesting one to see how it plays out.
I think the single biggest thing, the advantage, I think, is just the experience of the Guilfoyle coaching staff in this situation. Same coaching staff has really been with this group since they started these PIA or PIAA championship runs back in 2014, right, Dave?
Yeah, I agree. And, one thing that's really standing out for me is they're only giving up 2.4 points in the playoffs, where Clareton's given up 12.2. So it's showing, obviously Bishop Guilfoyle could score points, but they're not giving up that many in the playoffs.
Pat?
Yeah, BG is actually another team I've seen in person this year. I think after them, I'll be out of that. But they're a classic BG team. The cast has changed a bit, but they're gonna run the ball effectively and then be really opportunistic with the passing game. Bruce talked earlier about how important it is to have an experienced quarterback. Another factor that's helpful, if you notice the name of BG's quarterback, it's the same as their head coach.
It's the same as the head coach.
Yeah, when you're the son of a coach at quarterback, you generally get a little bit of an accelerated learning curve when it comes to experience. And they're physical, as they always are, as I know Clareton is. This is going to be a really good game. I feel like this has the making of maybe being a pretty classic low-scoring single-A game. But both teams definitely have a lot of explosive guys on them. So if I'm dead wrong, I wouldn't be surprised on that either. So
Yeah, Ian?
Yeah, and speaking about, quarterback experience, this is Jeff Thompson's second year as a starter for Clareton. And Clareton did shut out 9 straight opponents this year, which is something that, is an incredibly impressive feat, right? They played Amani Christian, who was a 3A team in week 0 and lost to them 19-12, and then didn't give up a point again until the second round of the playoffs. So, and that was in a rematch against Jeanette. And then the following week against a pretty good Canavan team, they gave up some points. Laurel in the WPIAL championship game, Clareton scored in the first half, went up 8-0, and then Laurel scored a late touchdown, and Clareton stopped the 2-point conversion, which would have tied the game. This Clareton team is really loaded with explosive playmakers. And I think, Greenville saw that in the semifinals, that Brandon Murphy, who's only a sophomore, returned 2 punts for touchdowns in that game. He's got a bunch of D1 offers as a linebacker on the defensive side of the ball. And Clareton, interestingly enough, you see Jeff Thompson's thrown for 2,400 yards, but in the playoffs, they've run more of a wing T offense with Dante Wright, Dion Lovelace Pompey, and Michael Ruffin out of the backfield. And then, they can either hand it off to any of those 3 or run play action or throw to any of them. And so it's been interesting to see how Clareton early in the year was spreading teams out and, kind of throwing the ball over the yard, and then shifted in the postseason to more of a, we're going to line up and play smash mouth football and try and guess which running back is going to get the ball here. So it's interesting to see how their dynamic has kind of changed throughout the year. But it is a Clareton team that this was a very highly touted Clareton, class of players that are seniors right now with Dante Wright, Jeff Thompson, Michael Ruffin. And defensively, these guys are excellent. Like, they really get after it. They've got a defensive tackle in Tavez Armstrong, who's really good in the middle too. So I think you're right, Patrick, that this really can come down to kind of one of those low scoring classics. And I think the one thing that always comes back to bite Clareton in these situations is the lack of a consistent kicking game. We've seen them lose multiple times in the state playoffs because they go for 2 all the time. And when it works, it's great. But then when you can't convert and the other team has a kicker that can make extra points, if you're in a 14-12 game, those points add up, right? And I think this is a situation where it might come down to something like that, where not can Clareton score, but can Clareton convert those 2-point conversions to get those extra points on the board.
And since we got everybody here, are we gonna all pick, or
I have prediction slides at the end, but we can pick now if we want to.
Yeah, no, let's just wait till the end then, if everybody's hanging. All right,
that works.
Yep.
The one I want to say 1A if I can.
Yeah.
you're talking about those special teams, those missed kick games. I believe, if memory serves, one of those was, I think it was the 14 game against BG, the first time these teams met, because I think that game was like a 19-18. It was a very, very tight game. And I think that one last thing, and I'll be short with this. One thing that's been interesting with the rise of BG, I think, has been, historically, whenever teams from the middle part of the state, District 6, rarely District 9, one of those districts would enter into the state playoffs, get to a state championship game, it was generally considered that the other team had seen a much stiffer schedule. I'm not saying that Clairton's schedule was easier than BG's. It very well might have been harder, but the quality of play that BG plays, BG's 1A, they play a lot of good 2A, 3A, and a couple 4A schools within the Laurel Highlands. They've played Penn Cambria, who was just playing this past weekend. They play Richland. They played Bishop McCourt, who was upset earlier in the district playoffs. I actually thought had a chance to make it to this past weekend. And some other good teams that made runs in the states. So, BG is definitely tested. They have that experience going back, even though it is newer players. These guys know what it's like to play in December. They know the expectation. That's kind of the program, the culture they have there. So I think it's going to be a great game.
It'll be a real good game.
Yeah, clearly. All right. Well, we'll wait till the slide to do our picks then.
Yeah. All right. So in 2A, Southern Columbia, who I guess does not go by the Evil Empire, but could, since BG has taken that moniker for themselves. Back in the state championship game after their 1 year, I guess we'll call it blip, where they lost to Troy, and Troy went on to win the state title. And then Farrell, storming past Seton LaSalle. We had Professor Ryan Briggs on last week talking about Farrell and just how good, Farrell has been this year. And I think, Bruce, when we talked, one of the things that stood out, Patrick, you mentioned the schedule that BG played. Farrell beat Erie Cathedral Prep earlier this year. So that was a really impressive win. And Professor Briggs mentioned that was a game Erie Prep needed to win to get into the state playoffs. And Farrell didn't really need to win it because their seeding was already locked in. And Farrell went out and took it to them. So this is a really good Farrell team that beat up on Seton LaSalle. Another coach's son playing quarterback, and Jules Johnson has just been outstanding. I mean, he did pretty much everything in the semifinal against Seton LaSalle. And these are two teams that have both been here before. They've met twice. Mm-hmm. Actually, Farrell's 2-0 against Southern Columbia, which might be the only team in the state that has a winning record against Southern Columbia.
I think Wyomissing does too.
Okay.
Yes. I think they beat them 3 times in a row, right?
Yeah, something like that. But
yeah,
and Southern Columbia too. I mean, they're coming in with some another Garcia as well. I mean, I thought that they were done with all the Garcias, but doing very well there. Dave, what's your thoughts on Southern Columbia?
Well, like he said, they did play twice, 1995, 1996. Farrell winning 6-0 and 14-12. So they do hold that 2-0 edge. This game, if you look at the history of AA, I mean, it's been dominated by District 4, mainly Southern Columbia that won, 7 in a row? And then, they had that, last year, Troy got them in districts. But one stat I saw was Southern Columbia is going into this game with 24 consecutive PIAA state playoff game wins. The last time they lost was 2016, I think the first year they moved up to AA and lost to Steel Valley.
The Mercy Boys.
And it's including, 7 straight state titles. So, I like Farrell. They have a lot of athletes all over the field. How's Southern Columbia going to slow them down? I guess we're going to find out Friday morning.
Friday, yeah, wow, that's right. It is the opening game there Friday. I think, and I agree. I think that it really comes down to, how is Southern Columbia going to match up with that feral athleticism, boy? I tell you
Hmm.
what, I just don't know how they do that.
I think that I
Agree.
have a guess. And if you look at those rushing statistics for Southern's always run some version of the wing T.
Hmm.
It's maybe looked a little bit different from year to year, era to era, but as long as Jim Roth has been there, which was somewhere around the Big Bang, I think, they have run the wing T. And when you look at those three backs there, when you look at Andrews, Garcia, and Williams, all those guys have, Williams with a good game could give them 3,000-yard rushers this year. And, if they can grind clock, they can control the ball, just play good old fashioned possession football. But Southern Columbia has never been a program that's had to do that. And I'm not saying they have to this week either. I don't know if I have a good sense. I won't get into my prediction yet. I don't know if I have a good
Hmm.
sense of this. It just feels so dangerous to bet against Southern Columbia that
Hmm.
I can't think of a great reason not to pick Farrell other than I don't want to say no to Southern Columbia because history. And so, I think if they can run the ball, they can be, like I said, pick up those 6, 7, 8 yard runs, just drain clock and control the game. Not because they have to. They're not Army going to Oklahoma running the flex bone trying to keep the ball out of Oklahoma's hands. Um, but just doing things to control the clock, and if you keep the ball out of Jules Johnson's hands, that's helpful for you as a team to win the game.
Yep. Ian?
Yeah, I think that is the big question as well is, how does Southern Columbia's kind of methodical offensive approach, right? Because we've seen this year after year, like those Westinghouse teams that Southern Columbia played were loaded with talented skill position players too. But Southern Columbia kind of has that, when you run the wing T, almost like a McKeesport style where you've got, you're running the triple option, you're, just grinding out 6, 8 yards at a time. Maybe you pop a big one here and there, but just matriculating the ball down the field, playing good, fundamentally sound football. And, you take 6, 7, 8 minutes off the clock. And then if the other team has a couple turnovers, you get behind quick and that running game shortens the game by a lot.
Yeah.
So I think this is one to me where, Jules Johnson did some things on special teams for Farrell with kick and punt returns against Seton LaSalle. That's an area of the game where it's those hidden yards, right? Like maybe it's not popping one for a touchdown, but maybe it's slightly better field position. And really for Southern Columbia, they may not be able to match up against Jules Johnson, but it's the same story. Anytime you have a dynamic offensive player on the other side, it's can we keep the ball out of their hands?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an intriguing matchup. And I agree about the running game versus, the just everything that Farrell can do, with both a dual threat quarterback and a D1 running back in their backfield.
And
All
I
right.
think if Southern Columbia can win the clock battle, that could help them in this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly.
One other cool fact I saw over the weekend about this game, the last time they played one of those 95-96 championship games, Aaron's dad, Amp, was Farrell's quarterback that year.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Coach.
Wow.
That's pretty
Interesting.
cool.
Yep. Yeah, so that would be a fun little family legacy to have both a father and a son potentially, beat
Yeah.
Southern Columbia in the state title game.
Mhm.
That's pretty
All
cool.
right.
Yeah. All right, on to 3A, where Avonworth knocked off Penn Cambria for the second straight year in the semifinals, and Northwestern Lehigh dominated Trinity. So, Dave, I know Northwestern Lehigh is in your neck of the woods. I'll just talk quickly about the Avonworth game. Penn Cambria scored a late touchdown. I've mentioned this to Bruce all year that Avonworth's starting defense hasn't given up more than 10 points to anyone all year. The teams that scored more than 10 scored late touchdowns against their second team defense. So this is a really good Avonworth defense that I think doesn't quite get enough publicity just because of how good they've been, on the offensive side of the ball and how they've been dominating teams on the scoreboard. But this is a rematch now. Avonworth and Northwestern Lehigh for the second straight year, and Northwestern Lehigh in the title game for the third straight year. So, Dave, I'll let you talk about Northwestern Lehigh's game because I know that's your area.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with their quarterback, Lay, and listen, Northwestern Lehigh, I cover a lot of District 11. They're the best, well-coached team in this area, bar none. Josh Snyder has built such a great program. They got, the longest win streak going with 31 games. Um, Avonworth, I know most people statewide are favoring them, and rightly so. They have so much talent. I think again, we're set to have a classic matchup once again that might end up going overtime again. But you look at Northwestern Lehigh, Zimmerman, Braxton, Chase, those guys, they all listen, they don't have a superstar. All these kids know what their job is and what needs to be done. They're so well coached, both programs. I'm just this is probably gonna be my favorite game this weekend. Just because you have two teams that get so much support by each town that it's just going to be to me incredible matchup once again, and I wouldn't doubt if this is an instant classic like last year.
Yeah, and I was at the Northwestern Trinity game last week. Um, you know,
Which
Josh Snyder, head coach for Northwest Lehigh, just doesn't get the credit that he deserves. I mean,
mm-hmm,
he just really understands his team.
mm-hmm,
This is a team, that had to really replace a lot of guys. I think most of
yeah,
the offensive and defensive line from last year's championship team had to bringing in new guys, and you know what? They have not missed a beat. I mean, they ran the ball very effectively against Trinity. Not that Coach, John Core is, chopped liver or anything for Avonworth, but I tell you what Coach Snyder's done at Northwest Lehigh is just been incredible, I think.
Yeah, I was going to go to that as well. I think this is out of all the games, probably the one that jumps out to me the most from a coaching
mm-hmm,
standpoint, and the jobs they've done. Josh Snyder getting a school to 3 straight state title games at any classification, doing that is remarkable, obviously.
incredible.
Especially a program that wasn't really, I would call like a statewide household name until pretty recently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They had their good seasons, in a more regional level, but they haven't been a statewide kind of power until recently. So he's done an incredible job, as you guys said. And then, Avonworth's not too dissimilar there. Duke John Court took them. Ian, you'll probably have the date. I know they hadn't won a WPIAL title since the 60s, before a couple years ago. Just the job both of these, and I'm not necessarily a huge six class guy. However, this is the type of matchup, especially with the benefit of knowing how last year went. This is the type of matchup that six class football was designed to have. I would argue we haven't had enough of them, but this is one of the games that the six class model was set up to have. These programs that hadn't really gotten their moment on the statewide stage, until they had that opportunity for those 4 extra slots to make a state championship game. You know, Living up to last year's game is going to be a really high bar to reach, but I don't think I think I'm kind of expecting it, as improbable as it might be. I'm expecting another game similar to that. I think it's going to be a
I
great
agree.
game.
And
All right, Ian.
just go ahead, Ian.
No, go ahead, Dave. Finish your point.
Dave.
So one thing I just want to say too, what was incredible about that school last year in fall, not only going undefeated winning a state title in football, but both their soccer teams went undefeated. They're the first school ever in Pennsylvania history in the fall to win three state titles the same year. And
Wow.
I said, what's in the water at Northwestern Lehigh? And, rightly so. But listen, I was so impressed with Avonworth last year. Two great communities. I think this could be the biggest crowd this weekend, this game.
So speaking for Avonworth, they brought back pretty much everyone from their team that came up just short in overtime last year. The only player who isn't back is Luca Neal's older brother, who was a running back on that team.
Mhm.
But they've shifted things around too, because Luca Neal last year, they were kind of rotating through running backs on different plays. Dimitri Velsaris, I think, was injured for part of last season. He's really come on this year. Luke and Neal, they've used in a slot back role now that kind of, split out, but will run the ball in. He's their leading receiver as well. And then, as I was putting this together, last year coming into this game, Carson Bellinger had just surpassed 1,000 passing yards. And this year he's got more than double what he had last year. And some
Wow.
of that is the emergence of Jaden Jones. And this was a kid that was on nobody's radar. He's a sophomore. He's 6'3", 180. Just got his first two D1 offers this week from West Virginia and NC State. He's had visits to Florida State and Ohio State. So this is a kid, he plays both ways, as pretty much all these guys do at this level, right? But, as a defensive back, he had a pick six against Amani Christian in the WPIAL championship game, and has really come on as, one of the top targets in the passing game. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me that's changed for Avonworth this year is the emergence of their passing game, not just being able to throw it to Luca Neal out of the slot, but now having Jaden Jones on the outside is really taking this Avonworth offense to the next level. And I mentioned just how good their defense has been, that, no one scored more than 10 points against their first team defense all year. I think that roster consistency has been huge for Avonworth, and Avonworth would never admit this. We had Coach John Core on our show earlier this year, and he's a very humble guy. They would never admit this, but they've absolutely been on a mission to get back here and win a state title, right? This has absolutely been their goal all year. And they can talk about how great it is to win a WPIAL title because it was just their fourth in school history. But this has absolutely been their goal. And for Coach John Core, his dad was a head coach back in the day at Churchill High School that then got merged into Woodland Hills. So he comes from a long tradition of coaching. And I think, a cherry on top of their whole family's, just coaching legacy would be to win a state title. So I think I actually wouldn't be surprised if, Avonworth's defense takes over this game, gets a few turnovers, and kind of does what they did to Amani Christian, just strangles the life out of Northwestern Lehigh.
Well, all right. Let's move on to 4A.
All right. So 4A, interestingly enough, both semifinal games finished with 28-24 scores, and both kind of had similar trajectories. As I was following the games on Twitter and listening on the radio, that both of them had, one team jump out in front to a pretty big halftime lead. The other team battled back in the second half. Twin Valley was able to hold off a late charge from Aliquippa. Cardinal O'Hara actually took a lead against Southern Lehigh, and then Southern Lehigh drove it back down and scored the game-winning touchdown. So I know, Bruce being closer to Twin Valley, Dave being closer to Southern Lehigh, I'll let you talk more about the games, but just from the outsider standpoint, Patrick already talked a lot about the Twin Valley Aliquippa game, but that was kind of how I saw this championship matchup come together, of two almost not only identical scores, but the way the games went were on incredibly similar trajectories.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, again, Southern Lehigh, Twin Valley have been, number one in my rankings throughout the year, in my statewide top 5 rankings. But it all starts with their quarterback, the coach's son, Colton Sams. He's thrown for, I think, over 2,500 yards, over 30 some touchdowns. The kid just makes plays, and obviously Sean Stecker, they're going to go as far as he goes. And he's been their, top running back. He's closing in, I think, on 3,000 yards rushing. But one thing Southern Lehigh has is a big offensive line, as I think Twin Valley does too. And I think these two teams kind of mirror each other. Coach Myers, he went to he took Middletown to three state championship games. He fell short in all three of them against a District 7 team. So this is, I think, his fourth time taking a team to the state championships. Will he get over the hump? I think this is you almost have to favor Twin Valley a little bit in this game. Two teams that haven't been there yet. But this could be a really good game.
Yeah, it's clearly going to be a good game. I think Drew Angle has just been outstanding in the postseason this year for Twin
Hmm.
Valley. Um, I think that really this game is going to be decided on that offensive and defensive line. I think, Twin Valley plays a really physical brand of football. Whether or not Southern Lehigh can match that physicality, boy, that's going to be tough. And,
Hmm.
big check mark in my mind for the experience for Coach Myers in this game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and go ahead.
No, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is, for Southern Lehigh, they've won games so many different ways this year, whether they just line up, run the ball, eat up the clock, and win games that way, or they rely on their quarterback, Sam's, to throw the ball. So they have that dynamic where, if they're running the ball and they're throwing the ball, they're really hard to gauge. Um, but like you said, I think Twin Valley overall might be the better team, but we'll see.
Yeah,
The
admittedly
one
not.
thing, Ian, about our slide here, this had to be the least amount of data you've had to put in a championship slide since we started doing the show, because neither one of these teams really, this is the definition of not the usual suspects, right?
Yes, 100%.
It really is. Yeah. I think the one thing that kind of stood out to me was the way Southern Lehigh beat Cardinal O'Hara. When we had Bob Long on a few weeks ago talking about the Philly Catholic League schools, he talked about Cardinal O'Hara's running game and how good their running game was. And
Hmm.
Southern Lehigh came out and built a big lead throwing the ball, right? Like they had what, 3 passing touchdowns in the first half.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of opened my eyes here, that I was like, whoa, if they can put points on the board quickly here through the air and make Twin Valley, grind their way down the field with their running game, if they don't give up, a big run, Southern Lehigh, I think, definitely has a puncher's chance in this game. I think this is the one to me that really could go either way. I kind of have my favorites in the other games, but this one I really think just field position is going to mean so much here. And, Patrick talked about it with Twin Valley, just how many short fields they had against Aliquippa. I think what their 3 first half touchdowns came on drives of 1 yard, 4 yards, and 10 yards or something like that. That
They were all
they,
short.
yeah, they had one long run, but
Mhm.
the other ones they had some pretty short fields. So it's hard to play defense when, if you give up 16 yards, you've got 21 points on the board against
Hmm.
you.
Yeah,
So
their
yeah.
one long run there early was Myers, Coach Myers' son.
Hmm.
And he and Angle are dogs. They're legit. They're really good running backs. When you get into a game this deep in the season and you have two good running backs, that's going to help a lot. I'm much less familiar with Southern Lehigh aside from following them from afar throughout the year. I can't think of the last time I saw that level of balance statistically at those high levels. Like having a guy almost rush for 3,000 yards so far this year, and then another guy throw for 2,500. Like that's obscene. That's insane to me. Twin Valley. Again, I was listening when you guys were talking to Coach Myers earlier. He shout out all 5 of his offensive linemen. The one guy that I liked watching, he's not a stat guy. He's not a box score guy who's really going to show up much. Joey Buckley is the guy they have. He starts at defensive end for them. He's listed at I looked him up a little bit ago. He's listed at 6'1", 240, and he wears number 9. So if you wear number 9 at that size, you can play. And, they put him at what I would call an H. Other people might call him F or something. He's basically that offline tight end. They run a lot of buck sweep. They like to run the ball heavy. And when you have a guy who can move at 240, who's either kicking out, wrapping up inside, leading out, that's a tough thing to solve for a high school defense. And Myers is a good size running back there. I think he's about 215. Engel's a little smaller, but they both run hard. For me, it's kind of what you guys have alluded to is, if Southern Lehigh is able to get to a point where Sams and Steckert get them a lead, Twin Valley is not, I'm not saying they can't, but they've not shown this year to really be an aerial team. If they have to throw the ball to catch up, are they comfortable doing that? Twin Valley's schedule this year, it feels like when you look up and down it, until the last, I know Susquehanna Township, they beat them something like 41-21, I think. But up until the last week or two, it feels like every game is 56-3, 56-7. They've been annihilating everybody. And if they
in a tough schedule too. I mean, they played Wyomissing, Lantern Strasburg.
Yeah.
I mean, they played a tough league schedule.
Yeah, and it wasn't a Little Sisters of the Poor type thing. They were just rolling everybody. And so, if they get into that pinch, what do they have? What kind of experience do they have throwing the ball late, coming back? So again, when you're a run-based team, everything's great as long as you're ahead of the sticks, as long as you're playing with a lead. I like Twin Valley. I've seen them. Southern Lehigh is more of an unknown to me, but yeah, I think this could be a doozy.
In Southern Lehigh, their only loss was against Northwestern
Lehigh. Yeah.
Yeah, so
not a bad.
So that says a lot about that league.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, I have to bring this up here though. So you mentioned Southern Lehigh's only loss was to Northwestern Lehigh.
Yes.
And Avonworth beat both last year's WPIAL 4A champ Thomas Jefferson and this year's WPIAL 4A champ Aliquippa. So if we put these 4 teams in a mixer between Twin Valley, Southern Lehigh, Avonworth, and Northwestern Lehigh, would the 2 3A teams be your 1 and 2 teams here?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of people say the 3A teams are better than the 4A teams. It'll be a debate, but facts are facts, and you brought that up. So you almost have to say
Wow. That's good stuff.
And
that's very interesting. Very interesting.
That's one of those things we can talk about as
for
fans.
You later.
Yeah.
Well, look, and I think that argument can be made even. Well, I don't know. I mean, you're really getting into some heavyweights between 5 and 6, but maybe the same argument can be made. Anyway, let's move on.
Roman Catholic beat LaSalle. I mean,
right.
I was going to say that. Right. If they both win state titles, is Roman the best team in PA?
Yeah. Well, right. I don't know. Let's move on to 5A and find that out.
How many people do we want to upset tonight? Let's
I know.
Let's see how many people can get upset at us.
I think I don't know how all the Philly Catholic League tiebreakers work, because they have a Philly Catholic League champion, right? So who was it? LaSalle this year? Because
I think it was Roman.
But Prep beat Roman.
Yeah, Prep beat Roman. So I don't know how that. LaSalle and then LaSalle. And
it might be a 3-way.
Yeah, 3-way tie. Yeah, we'll have to ask Bob Long, who is technically the Philly Catholic League champion.
He'll say LaSalle, but
of course. Yeah, of course.
No, he'll call it the way it is.
Yeah. All right. So in 5A, Peters Township in a game that was very similar to the Aliquippa game, fell behind early, had some bad field position, stormed back late, tied it, and then McDevitt drove it down and kicked the game-winning field goal. Did I get that score wrong? Was it 31-28?
It was
31-28.
It was 31-28. I typed it
Yeah.
wrong. I was keeping track of the scores in a document on my phone, and I didn't update the end one for that one, and I transposed them. My bad. All right, 31-28. It was still a 3-point game. My bad.
Yeah.
Apologies. At any rate, Peters tied it up late. Then McDevitt drove it down, kicked the game-winning field goal to set up a rematch with Roman Catholic. Not really a surprise here, since, as I mentioned last week, District 12 teams are, well, coming into the weekend, we're 32-4 all time against District 1. Now they're 34-4 all time against District 1, with Roman just taking care of Springfield Delco. So setting up a rematch in the state championship game between Roman Catholic and Bishop McDevitt. I will let you guys talk about these teams first. Bruce, I know you're very close with the McDevitt program.
And I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I felt that seeing McDevitt in their first game of the year and how they were giving the play calls to Sebastian Williams, the quarterback, and seeing the play calls in the District 3 championship game, completely different. I mean, complete confidence in that coaching staff, in Sebastian Williams and his ability to deliver on whatever pattern. The one thing that he just his accuracy with the deep ball is really improved. And also, two guys that have emerged toward the end of the year, Jerome LaRue and Jonte Quick, have come on. They still have Nazir Jones Davis and Barnes in there too for running back, and their stats show that they're a really run-centric team. But I think that they're going to be much more of a passing-centric team against Roman Catholic, and I think they've got the guys to do it. And I think that this thing's really going to be a shootout between these two teams. Not that McDevitt's defense isn't that good, or same thing with Roman Catholic, but I think both of these teams are just going to kind of let it all hang out. And with quarterback, with Beals as well, I mean, he's not going to shy away from anything. I expect a real high scoring battle here. It could come down to, a field goal, just like it did, in overtime last year between these two. It's really going to be a close game.
Seeing most of the people statewide, a lot of people are picking McDevitt, but I'll say this. When they lost that game, and I'm talking about Roman Catholic, those kids circled McDevitt's name. They've been waiting for this opportunity. And I personally think Roman's the better team. I agree with you, Bruce, that, there's so much talent in both offenses. You're going to see a lot of points. But in the end, they took McDevitt to the wire last year. I remember, Coach Wechter saying, that team was a lot better than he thought. And, to me, that was one of McDevitt's great teams. And Roman took them right to the wire. Roman Catholic, I think, has a lot more coming back from last year. And Beals, again, arguably, could be the 5A player of the year this year. Over 3,000 yards, almost 50 touchdown throws. But they have been waiting. They wanted to play McDevitt. And they're so happy that McDevitt made it. And this is going to be, I think some people might be surprised by this game.
I think it's always dangerous to go into a game when the other team is happy that you made it to play them.
Yeah, I agree. I
that's
agree.
that's pretty, that level of confidence from Roman. I mean, that says something, I think. I think that two things that stick out to me for this game is how interesting it is that, we're seeing the possibility of a shootout in this game when one team is very pass heavy and the other team is much more balanced. I always like those stylistic contrasts in a game that makes it more interesting, I think. One thing that has to happen for McDevitt is they have to cut down on the penalties to win this game. They had an absurd amount of penalties against Peters, and it almost cost them. And, I thought that McDevitt's DBs were solid. I thought their defensive line stepped up late in that game. They knocked down a couple big passes of Nolan DeLucia, who is also a dog of Peters there at the end of that game that really, really made a big difference. Peters had to settle for that field goal, which made the last second field goal for McDevitt possible to win the game. I think, you definitely see the balance in McDevitt. Can they get out of their own way with the penalties and perform the way that we know historically McDevitt can perform?
Yeah,
Definitely.
Ian?
Yeah, I think just going back to what we talked about early in the show with having an experienced quarterback who's been here before. And I think that, to me, at least gives the slight edge to Roman Catholic in this one. Roman Catholic losing 3 games. I mean, the schedule they played in the Pittsburgh or the Philadelphia Catholic League, I think they're, and that's not to discount McDevitt's schedule, right? Because they've played some tough opponents as well. But
They play a 6A. They don't play anybody other than 6A schools.
Yeah.
The entire season.
Right. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because since this is a rematch in the championship game now, both these teams having been to 2 straight state title games gives them enough points in the success formula that if they have the transfers, they could both be moving up to 6A next year. I don't know what the transfer situation is, but that's probably on the radar for both of these schools, that they both could be playing 6A football next year.
And one thing I saw too is the league Roman's in is the 4th hardest league to play in nationally. When you're playing, the only loss they had from a PA team was St. Joe's Prep in double overtime. They lost to a really good team from North Carolina and also DeMatha, who, did really well against PA teams this year.
Yeah. Before we get too far down the road here, listen, a shout out to my buddy Vince Rocco in the chat, man. He's given all of his predictions in the chat. We need to have more people in the chat jump in with their game predictions right now. Let's do it.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I had to jump in.
All good. All good. Yeah, and I think it is interesting. Patrick, you probably know more than me about how state championship rematches usually go in the second year. But just thinking about recent ones, McDevitt flipped the script on Aliquippa, and we'll see how Avonworth Northwestern Lehigh goes this year. But I do feel like the team that lost the year before does have a little more motivation coming in of getting back at the team that beat them the year before too. So, maybe that's another feather in Roman's cap here, like Dave mentioned, that really having, had this game in their radar and on their sights is the one that they want, wanting McDevitt in the state finals again.
Yeah, I don't have that data with me. I know I posted something a couple days ago about all the rematches. This year we have 2 rematches, which is somewhat unusual. To have 2 different championship game rematches from the year before. The one rematch that I was thinking Aliquippa McDevitt, and then I was also thinking of several years ago when Cathedral Prep and Imhotep played 4 years in a row.
That's right.
Imhotep took the first one, and then Cathedral Prep won the next 3. So small sample size there, but 4 of those rematches involve Southern Columbia, which just tells you again how many times they've made it. I think the other thing is the motivation can't be discounted, especially when we're talking about 17, 18-year-old guys. That's a huge piece. The other thing, though, is if I make it to the state finals 2 years in a row, there are generally two types of teams that do that. There's teams that make it the first year and then reload with all the kids they graduated with and just have that much talent, which a lot of teams don't. The other type of team that makes two in a row is a team that made it the first year with a lot of juniors. And then they come back next year and those kids are seniors. And sometimes that, as we all know, makes a massive difference in your team. So if you're able to make it with a more of a junior heavy team and you can make it again the next year, you're probably going to be a force that second year, even more than you were the year before.
Yeah, good stuff.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
So in 6A,
One more.
Yep. Two semifinal, I'll call them decisive results. LaSalle really just stomped all over North Penn. Central Catholic and Harrisburg, it was kind of close for the first half, and then Central pulled away in the second half. But setting up Central Catholic being back in the state championship game for the second straight year after losing to St. Joe's Prep handily last year. And LaSalle, this is one where Central hasn't won a state title since 2015. LaSalle's only state title came in 2009. So Central was here last year, but this is a really wide open game. And I think, hearing Patrick talk about Chris Black, I think only had 4 or 5 carries. He's only a sophomore too. So he only had 4 or 5 carries the first time these two teams met. And I know LaSalle is loaded with a ton of D1 talent, starting with Gavin Sidwar at quarterback and, Joey O'Brien at receiver and the other guys they have on that team. But I think, Bruce, you can remember back to when we had our season preview show and talked with Bob Long, and I said, this Central Catholic team, right, they're working in some new starters at their offensive skill positions. So they're going to have to ride their defense out for the first few weeks of the year until they start to figure some things out on offense. And then once they do that, look out. And that's kind of what happened with Central. Took them a few weeks to kind of get in rhythm, and now have really just gone on an absolute tear through the end of the regular season and through the postseason. Haven't really played any close games. Even the Pine Richland game, which was early in the season, they scored 2 second half touchdowns to pull away and win that game by double digits. So Central is loaded, and now with a sophomore quarterback in Owen Herrick, who, the first time they played LaSalle was taking his first varsity snaps, and now has over 2,300 yards under his belt this year, flinging the ball around to Maceo Watkins, who's a Navy commit. Couple other guys, Colson Gatton, who's a D1 committed outside linebacker that they'll use at tight end. So Central not only is big and tough with their 5 D1 kids in the trenches, but also, have now developed those offensive skill position players that they really just didn't have that, rotation and that rhythm figured out the first time they played LaSalle. And to me, that's the biggest question in this game is, can LaSalle's defense, which did really well against Central the first time around, can they have a repeat performance, or has Central now gelled enough on offense that they can be more competitive with LaSalle from a scoring standpoint?
I think that's a fair assessment. I believe that LaSalle is just going to just sell out against the run. They're going to make Owen Herrick try and beat him. I just think that that's the strategy that Coach Gordon is going to come up with. And, I think, a key factor too is going to be LaSalle keeping Gavin Sidwar upright. Okay. He hasn't really been pressured in the pocket this year. Okay. But he is quite a player. I mean, even to the point that I was talking to his dad after the game Saturday, and he looked me in the eye and said, "Hey, has any other quarterback ever beaten St. Joe Prep 3 out of 4?" I mean,
it's true.
Which was a great stat, and it just kind of shows you how much confidence that LaSalle has, even though they had that, maybe the best thing that could have happened to them this year was losing to Roman. Okay. That it isn't, a totally undefeated season, they're going after here. They're on a mission. They've been on a mission really starting last year with this team. They didn't get there. But I do believe that the experience from LaSalle is going to be big, and I do believe that in every way, shape, or form, LaSalle's going to try and shut down that running game and try and make Central Catholic beat them through the air. And I just don't see that that's in Central Catholic's favor, is to try and
Mhm.
put it in Owen Herrick's hands.
Agreed. Listen, these are the two best talented teams in the state, in PA. And, you know, has a team ever beat St. Joe's Prep twice and Pittsburgh Central Catholic twice in a year? LaSalle has a shot to do
That is
that. Right? I mean, that's pretty impressive. But listen, they have four receivers. We all know about Joey O'Brien. Owen Johnson has stepped up and become an elite receiver. John Patrick Oates, Jimmy Mahoney. I
yeah.
mean, he has so many weapons to throw to. It's like pick your poison. We're gonna double team Joey O'Brien. Well, I'm gonna throw 10 passes to Owen Johnson, but I agree with Ian. I think Central Catholic learned a lot from that early game and has gotten better as the year went. I think this game could be close at times. But in the end, I just think LaSalle has too much. I think, there's a reason why they're the number one team in the state.
I think that is an outsider who hasn't seen much of LaSalle again, other than knowing that they're the top dog right now in the state and have been. I think everybody thought for the entire year, especially after they beat Central Catholic in week 1.
Mhm.
It almost feels like they're coming out into Cumberland Valley as like the St. Joe's Prep we know. They just wear blue and gold. Like it almost
Yeah.
feels like that kind of mystique and that kind of force is coming out, because when you beat St. Joe's Prep twice, you're worthy of that kind of, that kind of respect, obviously. I think that, this game comes down to a lot about how I agree with Mike. I mean, I'm sorry, Dave. I feel like LaSalle has to be the favorite. They've played already. LaSalle won. It wasn't a blowout by any means, but it was a solid win. How close this game is depends a lot on the trend lines of both teams. Has LaSalle been here and continued to get better? Has Central Catholic gotten better enough to close that gap? And yeah, you compare an SEC committed quarterback against a team with a 10th grader, a very good 10th grader. I mean, he's going to be going to a big time school in 2 years when we're having this conversation, I'm sure. But that's a tough ask for a high school sophomore. And so I think I agree, the obvious game plan here is to sell out, stack the box, try to slow down Chris Black in the running game, whether it's, they have plenty of guys who can run the ball. Roman Thompson's a heck of a runner as well. But I think that and LaSalle, his name escapes me. I know they have a tackle committed to Notre Dame as well. So, Ashton Blatt's been a force off the edge for Central Catholic all year long.
Can't hardly hear you, Pat.
I'm sorry. I might be
There you
covering
go.
the microphone. Yeah. My pinky was in a bad spot. I know that, LaSalle's got a great tackle. If he can neutralize Blatt and they can keep Sidwar clean, like we were talking about, I think it's uphill for Central Catholic. I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout. I just think that LaSalle has the ability to put a lot of athletes in space. And Central Catholic plays really sound defense. And I'm not really worried about their defense as much as can Central Catholic keep up on offense, scoring enough points to keep the game close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ian?
Yeah, this is a fascinating matchup here that just it really could go either way, right? And I think for me, LaSalle has been the team that everyone kind of said, okay, this is now that St. Joe's Prep is out of the way, right? Like, oh, it's LaSalle, not that it's LaSalle's to lose, but it kind of is, right? And we've compared this a lot to what happened with Southern Columbia and Troy last year, that it was, Troy finally knocked off Southern Columbia, and now that they were out of the way, then, who kind of was next in line? Well, it wasn't wide open statewide. It was the team that beat the longtime champions. That was the team that was next in line. So I think LaSalle is probably rightly the favorites here, but at the same time, I do think that Central Catholic has gotten a lot better as the season has gone on. So I think this is a case of, can Owen Herrick make plays with his arm? But the other thing that I'll mention too, and I said this all the way back in our season preview show as well, was that, the one potential flaw in this Central Catholic team is that they don't have a great secondary. They have a lot of D1 kids on the lines and in the trenches, but they don't necessarily have, Chris Black is really good, but they don't necessarily have that D1 shutdown corner. They have a lot of good players, but at the same time, that's not the same thing as having, D1 kids across your whole defensive backfield. So I think if you're looking for, where can this game potentially be won and lost, I think one of the big factors that happened in that first game with LaSalle and Central was LaSalle hitting that big pass play to kind of set things up against against Central's defense and really take advantage of a matchup that they saw where they hit the deep play, and it really stretched out the game from what was a 1-score game to a 2-score game at that point, and then they added on another one late. So I think that's the one spot where Central is vulnerable, and they haven't played anyone since LaSalle that can throw the ball deep the way LaSalle can. So I think if you're looking, where does Central have the advantage? Well, you start talking about, Ashton Blatt and Colson Gatton and Angelo Pugliano in the trenches, along with Central's offensive line, Chris Black being a dynamic sophomore. But the weak point in the Central team is their defensive backfield, as far as just like it's not as heralded as, the D1 commits they have elsewhere. So I think if they have a weakness, it's there, and we'll see how it goes. But that's a instance where like weather could be a factor, right? I mean, remember the Mount Lebanon St. Joe's Prep game a few years ago with like gusting winds, and it really took both teams' passing games out of the picture. So, just depending on how the weather is on Saturday night, we'll see.
What was really funny is when I got to the field on Saturday, that's what Brett Gordon and I were talking about pregame, is that, we were both looking at the weather forecast for next Saturday already, so it was really kind of funny. I mean, that was the first thing because I mean, coaches say that it doesn't weigh on their play calling and their game planning, but you know what? It weighs on their play calling and game planning.
Yeah. One other thing, sorry, just thinking back to that Central LaSalle game, it was a close game in the first half, and it was a close game even, early into the second half. What really turned things for LaSalle was when they started running the ball with consistency and just popping off, 5, 6, 7 yards a carry and working their way down the field. And Sidwar even said after the game when they interviewed him, he said, we were waiting for, getting single coverage on the outside, getting a single high safety look. They were playing 2 safeties high the whole game. And then we started running the ball well, and they brought another safety up, and we knew we'd have a shot to take, throw it deep. So I think that's kind of an underrated storyline. Obviously, Sidwar having over 3,000 passing yards, he's the big name in this game. But if LaSalle's able to run the ball and get some things going on the ground, I think that's kind of the X factor for LaSalle too, to make Central Catholic defend that run game. And then what does Central do, and what does that open up in the passing game?
Yeah, and I think too that you make a great point there too, Ian, is how patient is LaSalle going to be? I mean, Coach Gordon, and if they see what looks Central Catholic gives them versus what maybe they, is Coach Lehmeyer going to, break tendencies from the first game defensively and what have you. I think that there's an enormous amount of chess match that's going to go on between these two coaches.
Yeah, and it's I can't believe I'm saying this as somebody from the western half of the state. It's bizarre thinking of Central Catholic as being almost like, can they be the scrappy? I don't want to say underdog, but
Yeah.
can they play above a little bit? Can they just nip at the heels of LaSalle long enough? Because I feel like LaSalle is in most people's estimations coming in as the favorite in this game. And when you're coming into a game as the favorite, Bruce, you hit the nail on the head. How patient can you be when things maybe aren't clicking the way you want them to be?
Mhm.
How consistent can you be? How much can you stick to your game plan? Know what you know worked, what you practiced all week. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater when things don't go your way and it's early second quarter. You have to obviously make adjustments, but you can't completely throw everything out. If they get into a point where Central Catholic is frustrating LaSalle enough that the game plan changes, all bets might be off then. And this is a Central Catholic team that, they're really sound and they're not, maybe not, as Ian said, they might not be that. I think it was that 2015 team that had like 12 guys with D1 offers on defense.
Yeah.
And so one guy was on the bench. It might not be that team's defense, but they play pretty sound football. And from what I can see, and obviously to play at Central Catholic, you're a good football player. So if they can just stick around, make things annoying, then, who knows what could happen.
Well, I think that the one thing is that LaSalle, there isn't going to be any like game shock situations in there related to like who they've played and what have you. I mean, obviously St. Joe Prep twice, Roman Catholic, who they actually lost to.
Mhm.
I don't think that there'll be any level of panic, but maybe. I mean, getting into this situation. I mean, they talked about in the post game huddle about the fact that they got back there for the first time in 15 years. So, there's some definite pressure on LaSalle now going into this game that they definitely have not faced the entire season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The
if
one other,
LaSalle,
yeah, go ahead,
go
Dan.
ahead.
No,
So if LaSalle does win, it could be father son both winning state titles for the same school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, incredible stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ian.
The other thing I was going to mention just on the coaching side for Central Catholic, Coach Lehmeyer's kind of taken that next step each year since he took over the program, right? He took over in 2023, and Central had been such a run heavy team for so long until he took over and kind of brought in a more open passing game. And 2023, they rolled through the regular season and then lost to a very experienced coach in Art Walker and North Allegheny in the WPIAL championship game. And then 2024, they get back to the WPIAL championship game, get a rematch with North Allegheny, and Coach Lehmeyer gets the better of them. They get to the state title game and get whacked by St. Joe's Prep, which is not the first or the last time that a Western team is going to get whacked by St. Joe's Prep in the state championship game. But now this year, they ran through the WPIAL. They dominated North Allegheny in the WPIAL title game. And now they're back in the state championship game. So if you kind of follow that progression, right, that it's like first year losing the WPIAL championship game, second year you win that, but you lose in the state title game. Third year, now you're back in the state title game. Like, he's shown consistent, ability to take that next step each
There's
year. I
been a
think,
logical progression to
Mhm.
this march forward.
right.
And he's a great coach, so that makes total sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bruce, you talk all the time about how some teams and sometimes even young coaches have to learn how to win at different levels, right? Like you figure out how to win in the regular season, you figure out how to win in the postseason, you figure out how to win in a championship game, which is different than in the postseason, right? Then you have to figure out, okay, in the state playoffs against these teams we've never seen before, how do we go scout a team that we have never played before? And I think for both of these teams, having played that week 0 game, there is some familiarity, but also some differences that, what are they going to pull out of the bag in this game that hasn't been put on tape all year?
Well, that was actually one of the questions that I asked Brett Gordon post game at is Saturday was the fact that regardless of who came out, whether it was going to be Harrisburg, who they had beaten the first game, the previous season, versus Central Catholic, who they had beat the first game this season, there wasn't total unfamiliarity with how these teams operate, and he felt pretty confident that going in, that regardless of who came at him, that he was going to have a pretty good idea of how to game plan against them. And it was more not necessarily game planning against the kids that were out there, but knowing what the coaches were going to throw at them. And I think that that was an important statement that he made.
Yeah. All right. So we've almost got to our predictions point. But just for, since I know Patrick loves history and numbers.
Well, Dave does too.
And Dave does too, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, a pretty good distribution of finalists this year, right? No district having more than 3. Having 7 districts represented statewide. Not too bad. And but some of the usual suspects are here, but also some aren't, right? District 12 has LaSalle, who's here for the first time in 15 years, and Roman for the second time ever. A Clairton team that hasn't been here in a decade, Avonworth for just the 3rd time ever from the WPIAL, Twin Valley, Southern Lehigh making their first ever appearances. Oh, that's actually on the next slide too. So just as far as championship history goes, like obviously we've got, the behemoth of Southern Columbia having been here so much and won so much. But some of these schools, I think, to the point about 6 classifications, if you had 6 classes, 4 of these teams wouldn't be here. So there is some give and take to it. Now, granted, you might have some very interesting, district championship and earlier matchups in the state brackets too, getting into the finals that maybe we wouldn't have had as many blowouts because some of these teams may have met earlier on. But nevertheless, just looking at who's here, some of it is what you would call the usual suspects, and some of it is not. So a pretty good distribution overall.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk predictions. I did it the same order. Bruce, I'll let you call on people, but I set them up in the same order as we did them before, starting with single A, working our way on up.
All right. Well, since I'm kind of leading this discussion, I guess I've got to pick first. It doesn't really much matter that I'm going first, but I like Guilfoyle in the 1A just because Coach Wheeler has, been at the helm throughout, this run. The Bears, despite the talent level that they've got, I think coaching is just a huge factor in getting these teams ready for championship games. And I like Guilfoyle. So we'll go down the line. Go ahead, Ian.
I can't pick against Clairton. I can't pick against the WPIAL team. You know this.
I know that. All right, Dave. No.
Well, I always say defense wins championships, and I like BG's defense. I know the Bears have explosive offense, but I think BG has enough to slow them down and win a very close game, like 21-20.
Pat?
It's tough. I do think this game is, we're going to say every game's tough. It's a state championship. This game is probably the one I'm waffling on the most. I'm going to say Clairton. I think Clairton has enough offensive firepower to break through BG's defense. I think that Clairton's defense has been playing at such an elite level all year that I'm gonna go with them. I think both teams are really good. Both teams are kind of similar, but I think Clairton has a little bit more explosive firepower to make that one big play that might turn the game in the second half or something.
Okay, going to the 2A here. See, the bad part is that I'm going to be on the field, and I think I'm going to be interviewing the winning coaches. So this could be tough if I'm picking against somebody and then have to interview them winning the championship or whatever like that. But I can tell you a story about Bob Wolfram too, and how he didn't like my prediction of Weil losing to Southern Columbia. Yeah. I know I told you that one, but anyway, in this particular game, I'll be honest with you, I think that this is the most lopsided game of the weekend. I think Farrell really kind of hands it to Southern here. Ian, what do you think?
I'm also picking Farrell, but I think it's going to be closer. Part of the reason I think a little bit closer is just because I think Southern Columbia is going to be able to control some things with their ground game and shorten the game overall. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, if Farrell gets out by a couple touchdowns and makes Southern Columbia play from behind and takes their running game out of it a little bit, I like Farrell's chances. So I'm gonna go with Farrell. If I had to pick a score, though, I'd probably go like uh 28-20 or something like that. So, medium scoring, but within 10 points.
Yeah, I haven't been picking scores. I wouldn't even, I have a tough time just picking the game, let alone figuring out score. But that's you. You dial it right in. Dave, how are you dialing in on this 2A?
When I look at this game, is Southern Columbia back? They play Steel High, see what happens. They win that easily. Then they play a very good Lansdale Catholic team. In their second half, they really shut down a really good, they had some Division I guys. I like Farrell's offense. They could score. And, again, will Southern be able to slow them down? If it's a high scoring game, you have to pick Farrell. Okay. But if Southern Columbia could control the clock and not running, they have to run north south, not east west, kind of like when they did against Westinghouse when the second half that they
Yeah.
made the adjustment, they ran east west and just got that one more play to win it. Roth knows how to win it. If it's a low scoring game, I'll pick Southern, but like I said, if it's a high scoring game, Farrell's gonna win.
Well, you have to
I'm going.
pick.
I pick Southern to
Okay. All
win.
right.
So
Pat?
I'm going to go with Southern as well. I mean, as hard as it is to pick against 2025 Farrell,
yeah.
impossible to pick against Jim Roth. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. I feel like, just the historical angle of this. There was a point in time a long time ago, especially a long time ago in memory, where Jim Roth was considered a guy who couldn't quite win it. He
Mhm.
lost several state titles. Now he won his first one in '94, and then he lost, I think, his next 5 appearances. Um, that is not the case anymore. And as hard as it is to say no to Farrell this year, it's what has that guy not seen as a head coach? Nothing.
Mhm.
He's seen everything. He's made every halftime adjustment there is to make. And not that the kids, historically, Farrell kids always expect to win too, but in Southern Columbia, especially the way it feels like they've really stepped it up a notch in the playoffs this year. I know that the first half was close last week, but then they pulled away second half adjustment type things. So it's just impossible. I would rather be wrong picking them than to be the person who says no to somebody who always wins it. So I'm going to go Southern as well.
All right.
I agree.
All right. So for me, the 3A is the toughest pick of the entire weekend. Um, I mean, wow, 2 undefeated teams that went to overtime the previous year.
Yeah.
I mean, just incredible that we have this matchup once again. Um, and I've got to go with the experience of Avonworth in this one. I mean, because they're bringing, Ian touched on the point that there are so many returners, from that team last year for
Mhm.
Avonworth coming back. Um, Everything else, I mean, is so close. The coaching and what have you. So I'm going with Avonworth in obviously a very close game, Ian.
I'm going with Avonworth in a blowout. I referenced this earlier, but I think,
Wow.
seeing what they did to Amani Christian, whose team was just loaded with D1 athletes and D1 recruits, and the way they just stifled that offense, I think Avonworth's defense has been one of the most quietly dominant units anywhere this year. And I think, Shane Lay is really good for Northwestern Lehigh. But at the 3A level, right? Avonworth's seen it all. They've seen run-heavy teams. They've seen pass-heavy teams. North Catholic's quarterback, Joey Felitsky, was the WPIAL passing leader last year and this year. They held North Catholic to 10 points the first time they met, and then 14 points in the WPIAL semis. And the second touchdown came with about a minute left in the fourth quarter with a running clock when Avonworth's backups were in. So, Avonworth has seen pass-heavy teams. They've seen run-heavy teams. They've seen teams loaded with D1 athletes. They've beaten Thomas Jefferson and Aliquippa from higher classifications. So and they've beat them all by double digits, right? They really have dominated everybody. And I think this was the game they circled on the calendar at the beginning of the year that they wanted to get back here and win it. As this group, as this senior class, and the emergence of Jaden Jones at wide receiver just has given them a completely different dynamic than what they had last year or even at the beginning of this year. So I like Avonworth. I'd say like 31-14.
Wow.
Dave?
Well, I agree that probably Avonworth is the better team going in this game, without a doubt. Northwestern Lehigh graduated some key players. Eli Zimmerman is one, but Josh Snyder has built a program. What he's accomplished, I don't think any District 11 team's ever done by going to the States 3 years in a row. Why not them? I know Avonworth is the better team, but listen, I'm a District 11 guy. I gotta go with Northwestern Lehigh.
There is nothing wrong with being a fan. Ian and I both talk about that. So, Pat, what's up? What do you think?
I'm going to go with Avonworth as well. They've kind of checked all the boxes, I think, coming into a game like this. They have a great defense. They have a lot of experience. They have guys returning who have played in this game before. They have great coaching. Really respect Coach Snyder out at Northwestern Lehigh, and that program they're going to be back. I think Avonworth will be too. These are programs that both feel like they're built for the long haul. They're not just like one good group of kids coming through. Avonworth, I think, seems like a better team. A little bit better. I don't know. I'm not predicting scores because I'll fail Mills. I might go for 6 on the winners, but I think Avonworth's a better team. I also think Avonworth, say what you want about it, but getting that close and then losing and then getting to play that same team again, that opportunity is just such a hard thing to discredit. The extra, everyone's going to be fired up to play a state championship game, but Avonworth, you have to think, is going to be just a touch higher. And with them being probably the better team, I'm going to go with them.
Okay. All right. And now the 4A, the championship of not the usual suspects championship in 4A this year, between Southern Lehigh and Twin Valley. Twin Valley was the second highest scoring team in the entire state for, I think, most of the year, without like gaudy statistics of, throwing the ball and running the ball and what have you. They just play a very consistent brand of football across all 3 phases of the game. Offense, defense, and special teams. I don't think you can discount the fact that you've got a high level of coaching experience with Brett Myers bringing a team into this game, which is going to mean an awful lot. I like Twin Valley. What do you think, Ian?
I'm going to go with Twin Valley also because they get the WPIAL Blitz show bump for Coach Myers coming on our show. I think Twin Valley's ability with multiple running backs to control the game and control the clock on the ground really is probably what gives them the edge here. I think Southern Lehigh has a lot of really good things going for them. I wouldn't be shocked. I think this is definitely going to be a close game. I would maybe pick it right in the same 28-24 range that both of their semifinals were. So we'll see, how it plays out. But I think teams that can run the ball this time of year are prepared to play in any weather. So I think Twin Valley having 2 guys that can run the ball and both be dynamic threats is really where I'm leaning. The one other thing I want to mention, sorry, just to go back to the 3A championship game for just a quick second.
Yeah.
So the WPIAL's success in this game, this is the 10th year of the sixth classification era. The WPIAL has been the Western champ all 10 years. They've won 7 of them. The 2 they lost was Central Valley blew a 14-0 fourth quarter lead to Wyoming area, and then Avonworth losing to Northwestern Lehigh in overtime last year. So the WPIAL has been like incredibly close to going 9 for 9 in these, and 7-2 is still really darn good just for one league. And actually they pretty much all came from the same like Beaver Valley conference. The conference has changed names a few times, but Beaver Falls, Aliquippa, Quaker Valley, Avonworth. The only one that didn't was Bell Vernon, coming from kind of the other side of the WPIAL map. But other than Bell Vernon, all the WPIAL teams, all their 8 representatives in this game have come from that one conference, which is kind of an incredible thing to think about. So sorry for the tangent back to 3A.
No. I think that's the great stuff there.
Yeah. But yeah, Twin Valley's my pick in 4A. WPIAL Blitz show bump for Coach Myers.
There you go.
Dave?
Looking at this game, yes, Twin Valley has 2 dynamic running backs where Southern Lehigh has 1. So who's getting the ball 90% of the time. But what I like about Southern Lehigh is their balance. They can throw when they have to throw, and they can run when they have to run. They have, both teams have huge lines. I think this game's going to be won by, in the trench. And why not Southern Lehigh? Brett Myers, this is his 4th state championship game. Can he get over the hump and win it with his son? We're gonna find out, but my pick is Southern Lehigh.
All right, Pat, who you got?
I think out of all 6 games, I feel kind of the most blind picking this one. But I'm going to go with Twin Valley. Twin Valley has scored points in bunches all year. Southern Lehigh has as well. I just think, Dave, as you alluded to, I personally like having 2 backs in a game like this as opposed to just one. The one Southern Lehigh has is excellent, but having 2 backs I think is good. I like Twin Valley. I saw a really sound defense. When stuff got hairy at the end, when because Aliquippa is the unkillable force in high school football. They will never ever quit or die. You could be up 80 points on Aliquippa in the 4th quarter, and I wouldn't feel comfortable about it. They didn't panic. They still played sound football. They made plays when they had to. They bent a little bit, but they didn't break. And then the one off the field kind of factor is just, not that I'm rooting for anybody, but I would hate to see Brett Myers go for 4, and having him get a chance to punch his ticket and finally reach the mountaintop, I think would be awesome to see as a completely impartial fan on this. So I'm going to go with Twin Valley.
All right, good stuff.
Well
now
said.
on to the big boys here.
Yeah.
Got I can't tell if there's 5 or 6.
It's 5. 5 A's. I think there's a typo there actually, and
he fixed it actually. I told him today, so he fixed.
Okay. I must have made these slides before I saw the fix, but
that's
anyway,
all right.
By the way, shout out to Chris. We could not do what we do without Chris and what he does. So at END2008 on Twitter, he does all these helmet graphics, not just for Pennsylvania, but for other states,
the whole
too.
country.
Yeah.
He has 50% or more of every state. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
He's awesome.
The graphics.
I don't think he sleeps.
I don't think so. And the rate he turns things around, like, I'll send him a message and just be like, hey, when you get a chance, I saw this, and like an hour later he'll have it for me. I'm like, dude, like, this is incredible. Yeah, he's awesome. So shout out to Chris.
He really is. And he's been doing it for how many years? As long as I can remember.
Oh my gosh, years and years. Yeah.
So shout out to to Chris, who makes all these great graphics. And
Yeah. Patrick and I
um,
had some fun with Chris back during COVID. That was kind
Oh,
of how
yeah.
we all really got to know each other. We
right,
did
that was
a
like at that helmet tournament or
yep.
something, right?
Yes.
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 Yeah,
That was a very involved thing, and Chris did
That
an
was fun.
incredible amount of legwork on that.
Yeah.
yeah, no, good
Yeah.
stuff, good
That was
stuff.
a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, a lot of fun, really, and I think just I think the game of the weekend is going to be this 5A championship between Roman and McDevitt. Again, another rematch of last year that came down to a field goal in overtime to determine a state champion, McDevitt. And Roman Catholic, though, with obviously they've had this circled on their calendar as well this year. I think this is just going to be another tight battle, what have you. I'll be honest with you. I mean, the talent level is so close between these two teams. And Dave, you and I both know these coaches very well. Rick Preet for Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously Jeff Wechter for Bishop McDevitt. I mean, the only way that I weight anything in McDevitt's favor is just on the experience level from a coaching perspective. I think that there were some tremendous play calls at the end by McDevitt to get them into field goal range in the game there. That screen pass to get them down there to be able to kick that field goal, I think was a thing of beauty. And so I'm going to go with McDevitt.
Yeah,
Ian?
and
Go
ahead.
Dave.
Go. Okay.
All right.
So my pick.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ian. My pick. I think it's to be a high-scoring game, and I like Roman Catholic to, just like you said with Avonworth, you feel that this is their year to get kind of a little revenge and beat the team that beat them last year, and I think Roman is in that spot to do it this year.
Yeah, and I think we touched on this when we talked about Roman Catholic before, but they went out and challenged themselves with some out-of-state matchups against, some of those elite programs from other states. That Providence Day School from Charlotte was undefeated. DeMatha is one of those national recruiting powerhouses, right in line with IMG and those folks. DeMatha may be a little more known for basketball than football, but still, like they're right up there, right?
Yeah.
That Roman Catholic went out and played those teams to be battle tested for these kind of situations. And I think having the returning starters, especially at quarterback, I like Roman Catholic. I'll say by 2 touchdowns in a high scoring game. I'll go 48-34. Still high scoring, but I think Roman just has too much offense for McDevitt to keep up with.
Okay, Pat.
I think I'm seeing a similar thing to the rest of you guys. I think, I'm feeling a shootout. I do like Roman in this game. I think both teams have really nice passing games. McDevitt on paper is probably more balanced, but I think that offensively, I mean, Beals, he's got the experience. He's done this for a while. He's put up incredible numbers against really good competition. And so that's hard to overlook. I don't want to use the word undisciplined because I feel like that says you're saying something about who the players are. But McDevitt was really penalty heavy on Saturday. And, that was one game. But are they able to fix that? Are they able to stop giving up free yards? They gave Peters Township over 200 free yards on penalties. And several of them were personal foul type things where it's just, let's get our composure. And in the state title game, where's that composure at then, when things are heightened even more? And so, McDevitt's extremely talented. They're McDevitt. They're going to be. They're McDevitt. They're going to be able to spread you out and throw the ball on you. And as I said, they have a good running game as well. But I just think Roman's been a little bit more tested with the real big boys. And I think they have more experience. And they also have, again, that edge of, we want this team. We want this chance at redemption. Here it is right in front of you. They're going to go get it, I think.
All right, and now the 6A, definitely the marquee matchup I think that we've all been hoping for all season. And LaSalle, clear favorite in most everybody's mind after beating Central Catholic earlier in the season. I think a team that's been kind of holding back the last couple of weeks. And I just think that they're going to let it all hang out. I think that LaSalle is not going to show any mercy, and I think that LaSalle wins big here over Central Catholic. Ian,
I think, that's kind of the easy pick, right? That the Philly Catholic League team just comes in and dominates because it's what they've done, right? There's the evidence to suggest this is it's what they've done year after year after year. And usually it's been St. Joe's Prep, but this LaSalle team is every bit as good as some of those St. Joe Prep teams too, right? Like, let's not discount them because they have a different name. This is a really good football team. LaSalle beat Central 23-6 in week 0. Central's improved a lot since then. The incorporation of Chris Black on offense might be a bit of the X factor. And I think just going back to something that Bob Long talked about when he was on a few weeks ago, saying that the Central Catholic defense was the best defense that LaSalle played all year. He said that was the best defense he saw of any team in the state. And defense is a hard thing to find stats on. It's a hard thing to, kind of quantify at the high school level. But I think to Patrick's point that if Central can play that scrappy defense and those two edge rushers and Ashton Blatt and Colson Gatton can get pressure on Gavin Sidwar, I think LaSalle is definitely the clear favorite, but I can't pick against a WPIAL team. So I'll go Central 24-23 in a mid-scoring instant classic state championship game where they just find a way to pull it out.
Okay, Dave.
Well, I think you really hit it by, listen, I think LaSalle's going to unleash it. This is the state championship game. Kind of like, when Southern Columbia that one year just put up all those points. Listen, I think Central Catholic's a better team than they were week 0. I think this game will be close for most, but I think in the end, LaSalle wins by 2 touchdowns.
All right, Pat.
I'm going to go with LaSalle as well. I said earlier, I picked Southern Columbia because why would you ever pick against Southern Columbia? And I feel a lot more confident in LaSalle's chances this weekend. But at the same time, it's a similar concept of, based on history, it's hard to pick against the 6A Philly Catholic League representative.
But who lost to they lost to Roman.
Right.
So it's not like they're not invincible. It's not like they're this invincible force coming in there. They have shown kinks in the armor. They are going to have to play well and not just show up.
Sure. These are the 2 best teams in the state, I think. I know that they lost to Roman. I get that, but they're not playing Roman. They're playing Central Catholic, and they're, again, the 2 best teams in the state. I think that the opportunity, this won't matter to them this week. This will matter if LaSalle wins on Saturday. But, Dave brought up earlier, the chance to be a team that beat St. Joe's Prep twice and Central Catholic twice in the same season, what's I can't think, and my hobby is Pennsylvania high school history. I cannot think of anything that's even close to that kind of accomplishment and achievement for a team in one season. And I think that they have, a more experienced quarterback who's obviously exceptionally talented. And I just think that they're ready for their turn. And Central Catholic's really, really, really good. I just think that LaSalle is a little bit more explosive, and I think they'll come out with it. I haven't picked a score all week. This does feel like a 2-score game to me, but I've been wrong before many times.
All right. Wow, really good. Great pick section there. All right. All right, Ian, let's move on.
This is just the wrap up slide.
Okay.
So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. All of our social media stuff is on there. So you can find us there as well. But I had, I had one question for the group here because Patrick mentioned these are the two, those are the two best teams in Pennsylvania. Now, obviously, the four teams playing for 5A and 6A titles are all non-boundary schools, right? All Catholic schools, right? It is what it is. Who would you say is the best public school team in Pennsylvania?
In 6A, Harrisburg.
No, statewide, right? Because we said, right, like LaSalle's not playing Roman, so Roman might be the best. Roman could be the best overall team in Pennsylvania, but just who's the best public school team statewide?
I mean, you could say
I'd have to go with
Harrisburg.
Peters. My own.
Well,
that would be my choice.
Yeah, I mean that's a valid pick, right? Because Peters took McDevitt to the wire,
That's
and
true.
McDevitt and Harrisburg went to the wire too, right? So
I think
yeah.
I think my vote for this year, had things gone differently a couple weeks ago, would have been Pine Ridgeland. But given how things have played out, no disrespect to any of the 3 or 4A teams still in it, the public school's still in it. But I think it has to be Harrisburg this year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Dave?
Well, I said Harrisburg.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But what's interesting is look at 2A, 3A, 4A, all public.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting, how it's breaking out like that. But, a debate that's going to continue.
Yeah.
And there seems to be, so much emotion involved in that. This year, more than a lot of years, though, is and that, which is, I don't know. I mean, we all have our opinions and what have you, but I mean, people just have to understand that you've got to keep it in, in a frame of mind that this is just high school sports, I mean, so yeah.
I do think it will be interesting if it happens that both McDevitt and Roman get forced up to 6A, because then, it's not going to really change how their conferences work because of how their both respective districts schedule things, right? Like Bruce, you said McDevitt's essentially already playing a 6A schedule in the Mid-Penn Conference. LaSalle, it's not going to, or I'm sorry, Roman, it's not going to change where they are in the Philadelphia Catholic League. But then potentially you have a Philadelphia Catholic League 6A bracket that has LaSalle, St. Joe's Prep, and Roman Catholic. Like one of those teams is going to get knocked out in the semifinals. And so, it is what it is. But I think that's a potential shift that could make things very interesting too, because then you'd have Harrisburg and McDevitt both in the 6A bracket in District 3. So and then that opens the door.
But in essence, too, what's happened is for in large part the PIAA problem is solved. With the exception of then it's really bad for 6A teams in District 11 and District 1.
Because every year we get them,
right? I mean, but in essence, I mean, because of that inexorable rise, to the top there, you're looking at a completely different way that those teams go about playing football. In the fact of if they're just in that 6A bracket, well, what's stopping them from going out and like getting 1 million transfers and everything else? They can't penalize them any more than that. Right. So you're in essence, you're just creating that one mythical, championship amongst all these super teams, and then classes 1 through 5 fight it out. I don't know whether I'm a fan of that or not, because the sacrificial lambs in this whole thing are District 1 and District 11.
So Ian, we'll do this 6A, 5A.
Yeah.
If there was 2 more state championship games and there was public teams, who's in it for 6A? And you all could chime in on that.
6A, I would go Easton versus Harrisburg.
Okay, that would be my pick, or North Penn.
Yeah. 5A, I mean, Peters just barely edged out Pine Richland, but I mean, Peters did win the Whitfield title, so I'd go Peters on that side.
And probably
Um,
Springfield Delco maybe in 5A
yeah,
out of District 1.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were pretty dominant all
Yeah.
year. Um, yeah, I mean, if so, so I wasn't gonna do this, but I'm going to now. So I
It's
had a
gonna
few
take
more.
days.
No,
It's gonna-
I had a few more slides that I was like, oh, we don't need to get into this, but then we started to get into it. So just because we all like data and numbers,
Yeah.
you know, just since the breaking it down from, you know, the public school to private school distribution from the state class or state championship era before the Philly Catholic League entered in 2008, and then looking at how it's been from the sixth classification era, like I can understand why the state wanted to go to more classifications when you had, you know, 8 years worth of championship games where over 40% were coming from the, you know, non-boundary private schools when it's 9 to 10% statewide. It's improved a little bit in six classes. Still not the same as it was before that, though. And then looking at large school versus small school, this is mostly a large school problem, right? Which is what we're talking about with the 5A, 6A, right?
6A, yeah.
That in the sixth class era in small schools, it's been 7 out of 60, which is basically right in line with the percentage of you know, statewide private schools. So not really much of a surprise there. But then since Bruce mentioned about the sacrificial lambs, I actually had this one all queued up and ready to go. So this is the finalists from each district from before District 12 entered and then after District 12 entered from 2008 onward. So you can see, you know, District 1 has only had 3 since 2008 when they had 18 before that. So that's like a almost 10% difference. District 11's had a 7.5% difference. So you're right and that's pretty much the whole 19% increase that District 12 had, going from 0 to making up now, you know, 19% of the
That's
statewide
crazy.
finalists. So since I know you all like data, I was going to skip over this.
That's
but
good stuff. Yeah.
yeah,
Having it at your disposal, as you always do, Ian.
Great job.
I do. And like I said, you know, a lot of this stuff I just present as data and people can take it as they want to, right? You can make your own arguments with it. I have my personal opinions, but I think just presenting the data, putting it out there is good for discussion overall.
Yeah, and it has been a real good discussion over our 2+ hours, right?
Yeah, Patrick, and Dave, thanks for joining us for this marathon show.
Thank
This was
you.
awesome.
It was a lot of fun. I appreciate
It was.
the invite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a blast. And now, you know, and plus too, look, our stuff's out there. I mean, you know, we're the first ones in with all of our picks, you know, just kind of hanging out there to dry so that everybody can pick our picks all apart here. But hey, you know, that's the best part about you know, we get it done first and then we get to sit back and see how it all plays out, especially this week though. I mean, you know, we got games starting, you know, Thursday there. And I know Dave and I will be there. Pat, where are you going to be for the championships?
I will be on my couch, but okay. I got enough cold weather this past weekend, I think, to last.
But, Dave, it looks like it will be pretty cold. I mean,
it will,
regardless, it's going to be cold on the sideline.
It's cold and windy.
Yeah,
that's expect
right.
it.
Yeah, I had my children at inopportune times of the school year or the calendar year to go see state championship games. So I'll be at a birthday party.
There you go.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, guys. Listen, thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you.
Incredible job as usual. Thanks for all you do, and you know, I'm sure that we'll have a wrap-up show more suited to you know, WPIAL there. But listen. Really our final full show of the year. We want to thank all of our fans that follow this program throughout the year, through the live chat, through all of the social media that goes on in between shows, and that it is all the coaches, all the guests. Ian, it's been totally humbling, especially this year with, you know, coaches getting game stuff. They beat other coaches from our podcast. I mean, it's
Totally
been incredible.
unintentional. Yeah, no, we had a lot of, big name coaches wound up with, Coach Warfield from Aliquippa won a WPIAL title. Coach John Core from Avonworth won a WPIAL title. A lot of, big name coaches that are willing to come on our show. Coach Plack from Peters Township coming on. So it's been great. And, like you said, I think when Coach Modus from Hopewell was like, "Oh yeah, I listen to your show all the time," and used what I heard about Southmoreland to beat him. I kind of felt bad, but it's like, you could pick that up anywhere from any interview, right? And
Yeah, true.
it was Dave. I don't know if Bruce told you the story. So when we interviewed Southmoreland's coach, I asked the question about teams linemen all the time, just because I always feel like, it's good to get good to get linemen's names out there. And he mentioned that he had a really young group on the offensive line, and I didn't make anything of it. And then Coach Mo was like, "Oh yeah, I heard that," and I blitzed the crap out of him. And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So
that's funny.
Yeah, no, it was very good. But listen, we want to thank everybody involved. Dave Micah from EasternPAFootball.com. If you're not paying attention to all the stuff that Dave's putting out, and the same thing with Patrick with PA football history, you guys are incredible. The fans and all the media people have just a complete debt of gratitude to both of you guys on what you do out there. It's just fantastic. So I'll tell you what, we will be back following the championships here with a recap show and that. But listen, thanks fans for tuning in to the WPIAL Blitz Show, Cumberland Valley edition. Enjoy the championships, everybody.